people coming through the security. It'll be another 5 or 10 minutes before we start.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come together and serve the people of Walton County. As we start our first meeting of January of this new year, we ask that you give us guidance, you give us direction in the way that you want us to go to make Walton County a better place to live and raise our families for all of us. And all these things we ask in thy name. Amen. Amen. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I call this meeting to order. Thank you for your patience with us. We had a backlog in our executive session, and it caused a delay in getting everybody through screening. Thank you for your patience. First item we have is any guests to recognize? Specific? I don't see anybody specific there. Okay. Additions and deletions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The county administrator and additions, I'm going to ask you to have a brief discussion regarding the local Restore Act coordinator position and the process of you interviewing those candidates. We're going to ask that you consider setting a public workshop for recommended changes to the Coastal Dune Lake Protection Zone. And the county attorney is going to request you approve the amended lease agreement with Walton County, Chamber of Commerce Foundation.
Let me interrupt you. Commissioners, I also, about an hour ago, have another request I need to add. As you know, we are in the process of building a fairly large waste center out in Mossy Head. Part of the process is called direct pay or direct purchase materials, where we are allowed to purchase material for and on behalf of a contractor, and the sales tax is waived. We are coming to those now. In fact, there's a number of invoices out there pending. There's a new administrative rule that requires a certificate of eligibility to be signed, or entitlement it's called, to be signed by someone from the county. I've got the certificate is actually prescribed in the form in the administrative rule. I'm just going to ask you, and my last item, to approve Melissa and the purchasing agent, the finance director or the purchasing agent for the county, to sign that certificate, and I'm going to hand it out to you during the course of the meeting. So that would be my last item, approval of authorization to sign the certificate of entitlement.
Commissioner Meadows has a request to add to direct legal to draft a tax increment financing or a TIF ordinance for U.S. Highway 331 in South Walton, including all areas south of the bay. You have on the consent agenda the strategic plan for the Economic Development Alliance. We're going to ask that be moved to the regular agenda, and Mr. Yeager has some comments to make about that. Under deletions, item 4, under administrative to remove from the agenda the approving of sending a letter to the Inlet Beach Water System supporting their efforts for the development of a new water well, and to delete the request to approve the Life Enrichment Seniors Quarterly report for October, November, and December, and they will bring that later date with a little more detail.
And including number 4, they're going to bring that back at a later date with more details?
On the Inlet Beach?
Yeah.
No, actually, they said they had a different funding mechanism that didn't require the letter.
Okay.
So if they need one, we'll certainly bring it to you. But at this point, they just simply said they no longer had a need of that letter.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. Under county attorney for the Empire Truck Sales.
Yes, sir. We're asking the commission to delete the approval of an ordinance granting economic development ad valorem tax exemption for Empire. Unfortunately, it was advertised for the next meeting, and I understand that at least one commissioner has asked that we have a couple of, or at least one workshop before we actually advertise it for the public hearing. So the first reason was actually advertised for the next meeting when we did the advertisement instead of tonight, but we need to delete it from tonight's agenda.
For the outdoor events ordinance, are you going to change that also from a public
yes, sir, to a
request for a public hearing to
request a workshop?
Request a workshop, so that anyone that is in the audience tonight expecting to discuss the outdoor events ordinance. That's at that point in time, they'll set up a time for a public workshop, but there's not going to be any board action on that specific item tonight. So anyone that's here for that, please be aware of that. Okay, anything else for additions or deletions? Do I have a motion to accept additions and deletions?
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, next we need to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve as modified.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Do we have any public comments with regard to items on the agenda? Ms. Harris. Ms. Harris, I've started to practice it when people come up. Again, I know that your name is easy to spell, but I have them state their name and spell their last name for the record, please.
I'm here enough at the podium to remember that. Suzanne Harris, Harris. I just have a question, Bill.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you going to allow public comment tonight? I see the room's full, and I'd like to know, to plan my night, are you going to allow public comment on the beach easements, or are you not going to allow public comment on that tonight?
Yes, ma'am. We're going to allow comment. Now, it's going to be, there's an item before it gets to the actual easement letter that'll determine if we're going to do anything at all, so you all will know that at that time.
But are you going to allow public comment before you vote on the easement letter?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Yes, ma'am.
My name's Mary Konovsky, Konovsky. I was out in the hall, so couldn't hear, but did I hear as part of the changes or the additions or deletions to the agenda a request for the Coastal Dune Lake workshops?
We will ask the board if they wish to hold workshops, if so, to schedule that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. So wishes?
Second.
And a motion in the second. Any comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to recognize Steve Yeager, the Executive Director of the Walton County Economic Development Alliance, to make some comments regarding their strategic plan that you're being requested to approve.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, good afternoon. Thanks for having me for a couple of moments. You have on the agenda tonight receiving the strategic plan for our agency for the current fiscal year. It was approved by our board at our December meeting, and now it's being passed to you. I want to tell you we're very grateful for the funding which the BCC has made available for the activities of the Economic Development Alliance. I would be happy to entertain any questions any of you might have about our strategic plan, the content thereof, the initiatives detailed in there. One thing we did add this year was a set of quantifiable goals, and I just want to blurt them out so for the record, that we're going to attract 15 new ventures to Walton County in the fiscal year. We will add 200 jobs, either with new companies coming here or companies that we already have here adding to staff. We intend to fill out Mossy Head Industrial Park to full capacity and work with the county in doing that. We will attract 2 firms to the Freeport Industrial Park, which is owned by the EDA. We will work on planning for Highway 331 opportunities for commercial development along the newly paved roadway. And we will enlist $25,000 in private sector support for the EDA's activities. I also want to pledge to all of you that I will meet with every commissioner at least once per quarter going into the new year. And this is an area where I think it's very important that I have a better dialogue with all the commissioners individually, and I will do that. I can entertain any questions from any of you about our strategic plan.
I will say, Mr. Yeager, you read my mind. I mean, I think it's imperative that you meet with us as well as the cities because they fund as well, and meet with us to find out, what our goals are, what's on our mind, and so far we haven't had that opportunity.
Yeah, and I like the idea of having
these express goals. I mean, they're
Yes,
pretty
I do.
specific, so I think that's a great addition to the strategic plan.
Yeah, I too like the goals coming from a teaching background. I think we have to be able to measure and see our progress through some goals like this. And I'm very interested in the private sector. It says that we're going to raise $25,000. I would love to see the private sector more involved. I know we used to have a plan that they bought into the program and they were part of a board. I don't know if that's the model we want to look at, but we can discuss this later. But I would like to see the private sector involved and, you know, be very instrumental in economic development as well. And this, what we give, and this little bit's not enough for economic development, but, you know, it's a start. So those are just my ideas on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
What's the board's wishes with regards to accepting the proposal?
Motion to accept the proposal.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Next item is regarding the Local Restore Committee. If you recall, Mr. Mike Flint, who served that committee well since its inception, has stepped down, leaving a vacancy in the environmental component. We're asking that we move Patricia O'Brien Murphy, who is currently on the board filling the education slot, to that environmental slot, and fill the educational slot by Linda Presnell, who had expressed her desire to serve in that capacity.
I so move that we appoint Linda Presnell to the Restore and commend Mike Flint for his job well
Absolutely.
done.
Yes, very much so. I second the motion.
And that would include moving Patricia O'Brien Murphy?
Yes,
to
it would.
environmental? Okay, have a motion and a second. Any comments? Any public comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Recently, staff, as encouraged by Commissioner Meadows and others, began working with the West Florida Regional Planning Council to investigate the possibility and feasibility regarding the process of developing a transit system, including South Walton and North through Defuniak Springs. The first step in this process would be to define funding for a transit study. Request to you today is to allow the chair to execute a letter to the FDOT through the to Jim Wood, the chairman of the Okaloosa Walton TPO, asking that they include funding for this transit study in their future work plan.
Yeah, they have to amend their work plan for an amount to do the study, so. Go ahead, no, that's it, that's all I had.
Is that your motion?
That's my motion, that we go ahead and request to send a letter of support requesting them to do that.
second that.
Have a motion and a second. Any other comments?
And that did include the north-south.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Next item, Commissioners, regarding the local restore coordinator position. If you recall, you approved moving that position or establishing that position in the not too distant past. We've been through the interview process and have narrowed the candidates down to 3 finalists. We recommended that you would interview those 3 finalists to determine which candidates you'd like to extend an offer to. We would like to be able to do that at our next board meeting. So if it's agreeable with you guys, staff, we'll just work with each of you to schedule interviews individually. We'll rank them at the next board meeting to determine which direction we want to go and who the top candidate would be to extend an offer.
Well, our next board meeting is in the morning, so do we need to interview them before?
Yes, what we try to do is set them up probably
Before maybe?
early next week or mid next week, give everybody the opportunity to sit down and visit with them, and then we'll rank them at the next meeting.
Do we need a motion for that?
It's just a direction, right?
Yeah, I don't think so, just unless there's an
Mr.
objection.
Jones, I'll be out of pocket next week.
Okay. Will you be here later this week?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll see if we can get that set up.
Public Works.
First item is requesting to approve a change order from GLC Contracting for the North Walton Mosquito Control building. We increased the size of one of the buildings where they store their pesticides and some chemicals. made it large enough that a truck could enter the building. That incurred a $7,450 increase in price and an extension of the contract by 45 days. So we would recommend you approve those changes.
Is the money in the budget covered?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Along with that same facility would be change order number 2 to GLC Contracting for the North Walton Mosquito Control Building. During the process of moving from the bid process through award, we've made a couple of changes that didn't result in any financial differences, but we believe the contractor is entitled to an additional 15 days to accommodate those changes, and we're recommending you approve that change order. It's just for 15 days, no additional funds.
In addition to the 45 days?
Yes, ma'am.
So 60 days. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
And even with those changes, we anticipate that facility being completed late spring or early summer. Next item is regarding the Mossy Head Industrial Park. If you recall, sometime back, we approved the eastern portion of the service roadway to place the power utility underground. This is a request to do the same on the west side, which would be Sand Mine Road. The price for that would be $66,442, and that would be paid for from funds either through the state appropriation for infrastructure or from the proceeds of land sales in that Mossy Head Industrial Park.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further comment? Any public comment? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Next item, Commissioners, is again regarding the Mossy Head Industrial Park. We went out for bid for completion of the infrastructure components of the park. We received those bids back late last week. We're recommending awarding that contract to H&D Contractors, who was the low bidder, at $2,521.60. That includes the base bid and alternate number 1. Those, again, that will be funded through the state appropriation and or the proceeds from the sale of property in that park.
Can you tell me what phase 2, exactly what that is? Is there a map in here or anything?
I can get you that information. It's primarily the roadway and the drainage facilities along the roadway to complete to the end of the park. Alternate 1 is the roadway connecting that primary road to the wastewater treatment facility. It is also completing the stormwater components as well.
Okay, so that would basically finish out the infrastructure on the main road, we're saying?
Yes, ma'am, primarily. There are a few other things that we'll look at doing in phase 3, landscaping and some of those things, but this primarily gets us to a position of access to all the properties and having the appropriate infrastructure to utilize them.
Second?
Have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
This request again is regarding Mossy Head Industrial Park. In order to better serve that facility, we have a water main that runs the length of it. However, it does not reconnect. It enters the park on the east end, but it does not reconnect to the main water line on the west end, which would loop that so we don't have any deadhead of water. In order to accomplish that, we have to cross the CSX rail line, and that's a lengthy permitting process, but we're requesting that you approve us to move forward with obtaining that permit.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Next item is item F regarding the task order 14008 for the Draper Lake Bridge design with Preble Rich in the amount of $113,550. If you recall, we obtained a state appropriation to rebuild the bridge. This is to get us to the point where we can use those funds to build the bridge.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. The next two items are regarding County Road 183 and change orders. And just to be clear, these change orders are simply, we're requesting them because these are funded with state dollars, and the bid for the primary work on the road came in below the allocated dollars. So this is allowing us to utilize those monies for alternates and to expand the scope of services on that road. The first one is for Genesis Group for $8,750 for the design and engineering of those improvements. So again, this would be a change order to the contract number 013006, again paid for with state funds.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Next item is regarding to those particular improvements. It would be a change order to contract number 014011 with C.W. Roberts, again for County Road 181 in the amount of $128,535.17, and increase the contract time by 49 days. Again, this is state funds to make these additional changes, which were alternates in the original bid, but in order to make sure we got the lowest bid possible, we set them aside, but now we're adding them back in because we have the funding to do so.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Any public comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Finally, Commissioners, at the Planning Commission meeting last week, staff recommended to the Planning Commission that they not take action on the Coastal Toon Lake Protection Zone modifications and amendments, simply because they made some additional changes to them, and we want to make sure that you were aware of what the final recommendations was. Also, we've heard a lot of discussion about perhaps holding a public workshop or workshops to get public input on that. So today we would recommend that you do schedule at least a workshop, if not more than one, but I think one would probably be sufficient to get public input, to clearly understand what it is staff is recommending, those changes, how it may impact individuals, and get at least be able to hear from them. Would recommend that we not do it in the next couple of weeks to make sure that you've each had time to review those proposed changes. So if you want to do it an hour and a half, 2 hours before your next board meeting, that's fine, or we can set a special evening, so whatever works for you
I'm
guys.
sorry, I missed the very first part of this. Which ordinance is it?
Coastal Dune Lake Protection Zone.
Okay.
Well, we can't do it an hour or two before the next meeting, or we'll be meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning, which is,
Well,
I think you mentioned the next.
what's wrong with 7 o'clock
Be
in the
down
morning?
here, be down here.
Yeah. I mean, so that'd be,
Oh, the 10th.
Yeah.
Be February 10th.
We already have a workshop scheduled.
okay, so let's don't do
We've
that.
already had one scheduled for 3 o'clock?
Okay, so scratch that. So,
Well, I think it's important we have it down here.
we can start
yeah,
at
oh,
1.
there's,
I mean, couldn't we start at 1 o'clock?
that'd be up to you guys. Could be a long day.
That makes a killer day.
We can,
Why don't we have it, well,
But then we have to do.
you know, like we have it on a Monday, like at 4:30 or 5 o'clock,
Like first
something like
Monday in
that, just
February.
a Monday.
First Monday's the second.
The Monday in between the two meetings.
so February 2nd or 9th would be Mondays.
February 2nd is what day, Monday?
Monday, both of those are Mondays, yes, ma'am.
I'd say Monday, February 2nd,
Okay, 5 o'clock here,
yeah.
okay. And we will, staff will be around to visit with each of you to make sure we clearly,
And they'll work out the format of the workshop,
Yeah.
how that it will be conducted.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's a board workshop or it's a staff workshop?
I think it's important that you guys be here. I think that you're gonna,
What time was that
So
for?
we're going to do it 4 o'clock
On the second.
on Monday, February 2nd, here at the South Walton Annex,
4 to 6, kind of like we did the last.
4 to 6.
okay.
And we will need a motion to set the workshop.
Need a motion for that.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further comment? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
So just to be clear, February the 2nd at 4 o'clock here, we will hold a public workshop regarding the proposed changes to the coastal Dune Lake Protection Zone ordinances and any associated discussion with that. That's all we have, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bagley.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. First item we have on the agenda, we are at a decision point, and we're requesting guidance from the Board of County Commissioners on direction regarding the Hurricane Storm Damage Reduction Project and the way forward.
In terms of direction, are you meaning, should we do anything? Should we stop doing what we're doing? Is that what you're asking?
Well, there's probably a multitude of options. The three main ones would be to continue with the process. The permit has been approved. The Corps, you'll see down further, the easements language is ready to be approved or modified or disapproved. The last cleaning up of the addresses and owners of the properties is the agenda item right after that. And then you can either hit the pause button, go full steam forward, or take the train off the track.
Can I make just a recommendation on that? Is that we put it in abeyance. We send out the easements, the official easements. Send out the easements to the folks. Let them decide, let them make the decision whether they're going to sign them or not, like for a date certain, like, I don't know, June, July, August, whatever, for them to all be back and give a deadline. And then we know if we have a project on a certain leg or not, based on what I'm seeing, all the comments, it appears as if, 90% of the people are not going to sign the easements. But I think that we need to put it to rest. We need to know for sure, and then we can move on. But if we keep this, keep kicking the can, so that would be and I would say that we establish no ECL. We don't request an ECL be established in this time period. We don't do a resurvey of the mean high water line. We don't spend any of that kind of money because we don't know what the final tally will be.
Commissioner,
we think we know what it will be, but
may I make one suggestion?
yeah.
Given what I just heard, because the permit's been granted, what I would suggest is that if as a part of that motion, you authorize the chair to sign any letter or whatever's needed to the federal or state authorities to quote unquote pause to use your term, pause the process, because I wouldn't want there not to be something in writing to them. And I think we just need to authorize.
Official notification to them that
just include in that motion is authorization.
Yeah, that this is what the board has voted on, and this is how we would like to proceed. That would be my suggestion, just because I think that there are an awful lot of people against it. Let's get that in writing from them. If there's anybody for it, if it makes for a project anywhere along the stretch, it probably will not, but if it does, we have the agreement from those people.
Is that in the form of a motion?
Is there any?
I wanted to discuss it.
I'll make that motion and let people discuss it.
Do we have a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, I understand what you're saying. Let's send the letter out and say how many get back. If our emails are any indication, we're going to be wasting stamps. Come on. On a personal level, I know I was here in 2004. I wasn't on the commission, but I was sitting behind the commissioners when some people sitting out here tonight came before the Walton County Commission and begged for their houses to be saved because of the storm. I remember that. I remember in my estimation, the mistake Walton County made when they granted those temporary permits. That's why we have the HCP plan, and that's why we have the Leave No Trace plan. That's why we have all of that, is because we granted those temporary permits. But I have heard the people that say we don't want it, and I've had more than one say, if I can afford a house at the beach, I can afford to repair it after a storm comes through. I mean, email after email I've gotten that said, I can afford to fix it. So, although I agree with you, I don't know that spending the money to print out stamps is going to do any good, because I believe I know what is going to be.
Let me just say this, and that may be what happens, but as far as liability goes for the county, I think it's always better to ask people yes or no, and that's just my opinion. It's always better to ask if it costs the stamp money, but it's always better to ask, and then you have a piece of paper that says no, I don't want it, or yes, I wanted it. Not that it may never matter, but just to give people the opportunity to say yes or no, I think is the judicious way to do it.
And I agree. I think a simple letter that says, yes, I want it, no, I do not. Maybe if they want it, they could send it back to us. So it could be, yes, I want it, no, I don't. And there might be some, believe it or not, that say, I don't have enough information to make a decision, and we could, at that time, say, go to this website, or give them, a place that they could go to make an educated decision. But I think it's important that we have something in writing, and that we don't assume either way.
And because I like to argue with myself, I think you're right. When a storm does come along, we will have a stack of papers saying, y'all said you didn't want, so I will agree with your motion.
Well, it's just good to in this kind of a situation, because it is such a huge effort.
Right. And I think we've all heard from many people on that. But Commissioner Jones, I want to make sure I understand yours. If I understand it, we'd be sending out the easement letters and then waiting to see what the response was on that. If we don't get a response, that does not count as a positive vote. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So
they have to affirmatively, I'm not a lawyer, I'll defer to the attorney, but the way they're written, they have to affirmatively reply with that easement signed.
Effectively, then, we would be doing nothing else, no ECLs, no anything else with where anything else is, except getting the easement letter out, which would be next on the agenda, I believe, and then waiting to see what comes back, so that we wouldn't be causing any interference with anyone's rights or anyone's properties.
Right. And along with that letter, or along with the easement, is with some contact information, so that if they or their attorney have questions, we have one contact person that they can contact directly and get that answer that they need. And that would be part of the easement.
Do we have to do it for a time certain, like 6 months, or I mean?
We don't have to do it for any time certain, but I think you kind of need to figure, need to think, well, how long is it going to take to send the easements out and get them back? 6 months?
I think it's prudent that we do set a time.
You may want to do that with the next item then.
Yeah, okay.
When we do that. Okay. For the public, we're going to take public comments, but remember, the issue here is now we have a motion that we don't do anything else with regards to this project until the easement letters go out and we see what comes back. So if you want to make a comment about that, please, again, yes, sir, come on up. Again, state your name, spell your last one for the record.
John Boushy, B-O-U-S-H-Y. Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. First of all, and perhaps I misheard Mr. Bagby, the Florida DEP has not approved the plan. It has been found to be complete. It is neither approved nor denied. And I suspect that there are attorneys in the room, because I'm not a practicing attorney. I presume that there are attorneys in the room that can actually confirm this, but I think it illustrates an important aspect going forward for this project, which is we need to make sure that we're stating things that are accurate and factual, because it may bring you to a different conclusion if you hear that it's actually approved in comparison to it's been found complete. There's now a whole nother process that has to go on for it to actually be approved, as I understand it. And I see Mark nodding his head, so I think at least one practicing attorney kind of agrees with that. Secondly, I would applaud the thinking that is now occurring, which is let's find out what our citizens feel about this project. I think that is an absolutely great idea, and I endorse it 100%. We can do that, you can do that several different ways. One way is to send out the easement and get information back. Another way is to send out an expression of interest, which would allow people to send the information back. It would not have to be registered in terms of registered mail, if you're going to send it out registered mail. It could be sent out. You get a sense of whether people are interested in it or not. I'm not suggesting that that's the best idea, but it's certainly another idea as a way to get people to express their interest to you. The idea of having a website, I think, is a fantastic idea. And there have been websites that have been prepared that have created lots of visitation and to some extent create some of the emails that I know the commissioners have received. And I'm sure they're kind of irritating because of the number that exists, but at the same time, they're also hopefully informative. Because I think what we're seeing is that there are more and more people, as they find out about this, that are really interested in expressing their view about the project. So as you think about this and the direction going forward, I think the direction is absolutely in lockstep. Let's find out what the owners really would like to do or not do. Let's find out if they want to pay for their own damage or they want government to help them. And so from that standpoint, I support that. I just think we need to be very factual and accurate in public comments about the status of things in the project. It's not the first time that we've heard about sand coming from different areas and things like that. So I just think it's important to be factual.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Gary Drake, D-R-A-K-E. To send out the easements like a referendum, I think, is not prudent. Because if you get these easements, don't get enough easements back, and you don't get a project, then you've got these legal interests in beachfront property owners' property. And now how are you gonna go back and undo that? It just creates a legal quagmire, I think, that if the project ends up dying, to basically to do a referendum with easements. So I want to piggyback with or agree with John Balshi if you're going to determine to send these out, send out affidavits for owners to indicate what their preferences are, or letters of commitments, or whatever you want to call them. But to use easements as a referendum tool, I think is not the way to do it.
Let me ask you, Gary.
Yeah.
What if you send out a lot of letters and said, people committed and this and that and the other, and then a year later, let's say, the easements go out or some scenario like that, and then people have changed their minds. The reason I said easements is because, I think we need to know, are you going to sign on the dotted line or not? And I think if you do a letter of commitment or an affidavit, I'm just not sure that would account for anything. Because somebody might 3 months later, well, I think I might change my mind on how I'm going to, So that's my concern, is if we don't send out the official easement and they see the official easement and they either know they have to sign on the dotted line or not, I think you're going to get much more of a valid response. That's just my thinking.
But things can also change in that year, and people's minds change in that year.
Things could change a lot,
Right.
but I think if we set the time period, okay, guys, we got 6 months. You're going to sign it or not. comes back, we don't have a project, then we don't have a project. Let's say that there's a mass reversal of, and people say, you know, well, now we've kind of decided that 90% of us want it. I mean, I think you could always come back and say, well, now 90% of us want it, and then could you take another look at it? And I think we'd be, I think we'd be amenable. I'd be amenable to that. I don't know if the others would, but you know, so there is flexibility. I mean, you could change your mind, but I think in order to get this put to rest and to understand and know what we're doing, that would be, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not an attorney either, but I think once you, out of the 950 or however many easements that is required,
right,
and you get back 150 or whatever the number is, that doesn't create a valid project. How are you going to undo that with the easements that
undo the easements that are signed
that are signed that you're not going to have a project now? So.
Well, the Corps decides that. The Army Corps, is that correct, Jim? The Corps decides if there's a valid project. So you know, I think that we would have to make some kind of a official response to the people and say that, you know, we don't have a project. Thank you for signing the easement. I don't know.
There's two answers. One, the easement itself is only valid as long as there's a project, and once it's deauthorized, the easement is no longer. And the second solution would be to return them and record a termination of easement, just out of probably overabundance of caution. Mike Beatson, they're smiling at me. He is a well-known real property lawyer, and that would solve that problem if it came to that.
If I recall, what the easement language is deauthorized by Congress. The project. And
right.
When was the last time Congress ever deauthorized?
So that probably wouldn't.
We would probably just do a term.
But some legal format would have to be worked out so that, you know, the people who did sign it, they would get a letter that said, you know, officially this is no longer, it doesn't feasibly work for whatever.
Okay, I just wanted to point out, you're asking for a 50-year or more easement, that if the project fails, then how are you going to back out of that? So maybe use some other tool.
Well, and I think it's...
We'll give consideration.
That's all kind of a legal type thing, I think, but...
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Commission. My name is Kent Seyfried, attorney with Hopping Green and Sam's in Tallahassee. I represent a project.
Spell your last name, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't spell it. I heard you say that earlier. Safriet. I represent about 23 beachfront property owners along the stretch of beach that's proposed for renourishment, and they account for approximately 5,000 linear feet of beach. And I can tell you that they're not going to be signing easements, and that accounts for about 5 to 6% of the overall project. And those are just the people that have signed up for me to represent them, not the people that have said, I don't want the project. And I think Commissioner Commander noted that there's not going to be an overwhelming support, and I think even Commissioner Meadows noted that as well. And I think you're thinking about this in a prudent manner. Let's figure out who wants the project, and then let's design the project around the people that want it. Don't design a project nobody wants and then try to peg them into the project. But nonetheless, even if you assume people want this project, this project can't even be completed as designed. The sand quality doesn't meet Walton County's ordinance. And I'm sure y'all are familiar.
We're talking now specifically about the go forward and find out what they want, not the quality of the sand, not the ECLs.
I understand, Chairman, and what I'm saying is it shouldn't go forward at all, because it ain't going to go forward eventually, because the sand quality doesn't meet the ordinance. The prohibited materials, and I'm suggesting that the approach that Commissioner Commander suggested, that the project be killed today, is the approach you should take. And this is the reason why. Because your own Walton County ordinance defines prohibited materials as placing any sand on a beach that has a Munsell color chart value darker than 8.0. The Corps' own survey.
All right, Mr. Seyfried, I'm going to ask you, please stick to the area that we're talking about now, which is the idea of going forward or taking a pause, and not the color of the sand, not the quality of the sand, not the ECL, and that's where you're getting off into. So I'm going to ask you to either limit your comments to that or complete them.
Well, the other option was kill the project. Stop the project. Pause
That's
it,
a possibility.
or go for it. I'm talking about stopping it. It should be stopped for this very reason. The Corps' own data says 99% of the sand has a Monsell value of 7, which is one below 8.
Okay.
Even if it gets approved for a small segment, the sand's not ever going to pass your ordinance, and it's a prohibited project, no matter if anybody wants it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bill Hackmeyer, representing Vizcaya and also the Palms. And I'm going to keep it short.
Spell your name.
Pardon?
Spell your name, please.
Hackmeyer.
Thank you.
And I'm going to keep it really short. I really think that sending a letter out to all the property owners, like I think Cindy Meadows suggested, maybe Cecilia Jones, and you, Ms. Commander, is probably the best way, and just get an up or down answer. And then thereafter, postpone the project, send the letter out, and then thereafter proceed on or kill it. That's my sentiments.
Thank you. Mr. Hildreth.
Emmett Hildreth, Blue Mountain Beach, citizen of Walton County, Florida.
Spell your last name, please.
Hildreth.
Thank you.
Emmett, Emmett. I concur with what Bill Hackmeyer said, Gary Drake said, John Bassett said, and Kent said. This is no time to be sending an easement out, and we beg you not to send the easement out. But in lieu of sending the easement out, send a letter out, yes or no. We either want the project or don't want the project. Yes or no, we do or don't, before you send any easement out. Now, I could spend the next 4 hours discussing the horror of this easement, but if you will defer sending the easement out and just send a letter out, yes or no, we will do the project or don't, then we at least have a format for a discussion of who really wants it and how many and what percentage wants it. Now, with reference to the easement, commissioners, this easement at this moment has not been approved or discussed. So you can't send an easement out that hadn't been discussed or approved by the commission, which it hadn't been. This easement has not been approved.
And that's the next item on the agenda.
The next thing is this. I would ask the Honorable Attorney Mark Davis. It's the opinion of some of us legal minds that this easement creates a reduction in the security that's in any mortgage that's on any beachfront property. Therefore, under the mortgage terms of the mortgage that's been signed by the mortgagor, the mortgagee has a right to foreclose, because this easement, if it's signed unwittingly by someone who is really not thinking, they are violating their own mortgage. And bankers concur with the statement I just made. Now, we need to carefully consider what we are doing. Mr. Attorney Mark Davis, are we precipitating a foreclosure, a violation of a mortgage that's on a beachfront property owner by reducing the security, which we definitely are reducing the security? The value of the property of the beachfront property owners will be cut in half if this project goes to conclusion. So we need to consider these legal things. And let me say this, and I close. I understand this easement. We've been studying it for months and months and months. I'll give you one example of where it fails
in terms of Walton County and the people that are hired by Walton County. The TDC in the workshops originally said very pointedly that if you like your property rights, you can keep your property rights. Well, that is simply not true. Anyone who reads these 4 pages understands that these 4 pages on this easement take away property rights and put an enormous burden on the property. This will precipitate, Mr. Attorney Mark Davis, a foreclosure of beachfront property owner by the mortgagee because the value is reduced. Now,
Can I ask you a question? Is what you're saying you would want a separate, not an easement going out, but a letter to find out the interest going?
That's
okay.
correct.
Okay.
That's
Thank
correct.
You. Thank you.
And we don't have time to get into the downside of the easement and what it really is. You've heard me speak that too many times here. Property rights, redistribution of wealth. I don't need to cover that. But I think the legal implications of what we're doing and what we are precipitating. And my thought is this: why do you want to fundamentally change Walton County? Why do you want to reduce property values?
Thank you, Mr.
Why do you want to reduce property values on the beach and
Mr.
the
Hilton.
less tax base? Why do you want to do all these things?
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Linda Hildreth, Hildreth. I want to say that every one of you know how I feel about this project, and I'm not going to repeat it, but I have 4 words to say to you tonight. Thank you for listening to your constituents.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'll just be brief. I'm Sherry Chase the cat, C-H-A-S-E. I agree with Mr. Boucher, Mr. Drake, Mr. Seifert, Mr. Hackmeyer, Mr. Hildreth, Mrs. Hildreth. I believe Sarah Commander, Miss Sarah, agrees with us. I believe that Miss Cecilia agreed with us. I don't agree with what Cindy Meadows said. I do think that we need to decide if a no response in a straw type vote, means that there is no interest. That was very unclear to me. I think we need to at least know what the tool is going to be and forget the easement. Just use the tool for a straw vote and decide how that straw vote should be done. I think that will tell the commissioners a lot of information, and I thank you for listening to us.
I know that Commissioner Meadows doesn't need anybody to stand up for her, but I think that she precipitated getting this conversation going, and so we needed to get a motion of some kind of second on the floor, and I thank her for that, and that's allowed everyone to come up and express their point of view on it. So I wouldn't want to say that there's anyone up here that's either for or against anything that's been said, but I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
I just am against sending out easements for all the reasons stated so far.
Thank
I
you.
don't need to reiterate it. A straw vote would be great.
And Bill, thank you for that clarification. Sometimes we make a motion and a vote so we can discuss it, and that doesn't necessarily mean we're in favor one way or the other, but we have to be able to discuss it, and some folks do not understand that.
Gentleman over, yes, sir.
Randall Brown, B-R-O-W-N, and thank you for the opportunity to come up here. I'm just curious, if you send out this easement as is being proposed, what would the commissioners think is the percentage of signed easements that would require you to take this to the next level? I mean, is it a simple majority? Is it 2/3? Or I'm just curious what your thoughts are on
It
this.
would-
I mean, is it
you want-
10%?
Well, I think the Army Corps of Engineers would have the final say on what the appropriate percentage would be. But however, I think that they're not going to go forward if there's a lack of board support for going forward. And I think we would be sensitive to what these, whether it's an easement that goes out or whether it's a survey that goes out. I think that we would all be sensitive to the wishes of the property owners.
Yeah. The Corps has already told us that if we don't have a viable project and they determine the viability of a stretch, if we don't have a stretch that's financially feasible to them and makes sense all other ways, then, you know, they would not put forth the money to do it. So, you know, basically, they don't have easements, there's be no project.
Okay, so it would also, you'd also have to look at the linear footage or the square footage or whatever of the approvals that you get in addition to just the raw yes or
absolutely. The Corps would take it and put it into their, from what I understand, they have a program, a computer program that actually runs financial analysis on the viability of these projects. And they've done hundreds of these projects all over. So they've, you know, and they told us, they said, you will, you know, if we don't get the signatures for easements, then it probably is not going to be a viable project. And I don't think the board is going to go forward with I mean, we're not going to pay for it. The county's not going to pay for it. It's the federal government and the state. So I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I was just trying to get a sort of what the mindset is, you know, what's a go, no go, you know, mark in the sand, so to speak. And also, I think I agree with someone that mentioned earlier about sending out information rather than just sending out maybe an easement, because I think there's a lot of people that are still, believe it or not fully aware of the ramifications of this project. I know I'm an owner here, and I just recently found out about it. I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to receive these easement requests that are out of town, that have out of town addresses. And it's going to blindside them, and they're not really going to know what it's all about. So I think additional information, if you're going to send something out, be it an easement or a survey or something, will really be beneficial to those owners.
And that's why I suggested that, you know, that I like to go on the philosophy that people are very smart, and, you know, we're going to send it out, and, you know, it's not up to me to decide whether they're going to understand it or not. They're going to either have an attorney, or they're either going to call or make some requests for additional information. So I don't want to assume that I'm smarter than they are. I want them to decide on their own.
Sure. And there's plenty of information out there. You just have to get out there and dig for it.
And I think the easement language it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like getting the true document, the true, you know, it's the true document. Instead of a marriage certificate, you're getting kind of like a preliminary marriage certificate. Here's what it's going to be like. Here's who you're marrying, and do you want to sign up for it? But, you know, when you get the real document, they go, okay, here's what it really is. Are you going to sign on to it? Maybe some people might go, I don't think so, because I've seen the real document, and I've seen, you know. So, and that's why I think if you don't send the real document out and you send kind of, sign this kind of, you know, half commitment letter, I don't think you're going to get, you're not going to view that as a property owner as something as serious as you're going to view an easement. You're going to look at it and say, this is an easement, I own property down there, I better talk to my lawyer. I'm assuming that people are smart and that they're going to do that.
What are, you know, the other things to go along with signing the easement, building up the beach, you know, the public access to that section, all of that needs to be understood, I think, by the owners.
Well, and I think that when the owner gets the easement, he's going to either, you know, ask questions or go, no, I'm not signing anything legal. Right. He's going to either ask questions or he's going to call a lawyer, and that's what I would assume. That I'm going to assume that people are smart and that they're going to respond to it in a way that smart people do.
Okay. Just for the record, I'm not
Thank you,
in favor of this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want the marriage now.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is David Bailey, B-A-I-L-E-Y. I'm here representing the Rosemary Beach Property Owners Association. And I'd like to provide a letter to be entered into the record. I won't read the whole thing, but we are, the beach in Rosemary Beach is common area. Y'all are familiar with the size of Rosemary Beach. The Board of Directors has struggled with this project. We are very appreciative of y'all's efforts, the TDC's efforts in trying to move forward with the project. However, we're one of those owners that has too many questions to be able to proceed and act on the easement in its current form. I came tonight to ask that you not proceed with issuing the easement, and since there's some uncertainty on whether that action will be before you tonight, I figured it was a good idea to enter this into the record now. So we would be, I think I can characterize our board as being very interested in an opportunity to provide our thoughts on the project in a more formal format. So something along the lines of a letter would be something we would like to see being issued. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
The problem with a letter is that letter would have to be probably about 20 pages to really explain what, you I guess you could do a cover letter with the easement, but how do you send out a letter that, that succinctly says, are you for this? And the person goes, for what? So that would be my...
Thank you for offering me a chance to respond. My understanding is the project in some form or another has been going on for about 10 years. And it seems a pity that a project, I was somewhat upset to hear that the possibility of the project dying tonight was something being contemplated. We really would like to see just a little bit more time put into this because the goal of the project is one that this community believes very much in. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My name is Lester Smith. That's Lester Smith. I'm a property owner, beachfront property owner at Paradise by the Sea. I only have one question that can be answered with yes or no. If you are not successful with the easement language, will you be doing eminent domain? Yes or no, please.
I think I can speak for myself. No. If people don't want this project, I'm not going to force anything on anybody.
Okay.
I don't know what the others feel.
Commissioner Jones?
I'm in full agreement.
You need to just address the chair, please. But I think that at the appropriate time that would come up, but I can tell you this, in the past, there's never been an instance where this county has enforced eminent domain, and I'm not aware of anybody having the want to do that. So we want to take seriously the responses that we get from y'all.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Commissioners, any further discussion amongst us on this? I know we've gotten both the thoughts of the easement, a separate letter, or a letter with the easement attached so they can review it and respond to it. I certainly concur with Commissioner Meadows that we need to stop kicking the can down the road and come to something that can help us bring to resolution a yes, a no, or whatever part of it is. And we currently have a motion on the floor to send out the easement letter.
Comment.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Commissioner Meadows as far as sending something out to the people. Now, I've received somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 emails. Maybe half a dozen of them were in some support of this project. The majority were not. But there's 900 plus other property owners on the beach that may or may not be as well versed in what the folks are in this room. To send them a letter out saying, will you want this project or you don't, without additional information, or at least with the easement, it gives them something that'll kick off in their head. Well, maybe I need to start researching this a little bit better before I respond back. Without that information, like I said, we got a lot of absentee owners, live out of state, probably haven't got a clue that this is even going on. And I think we ought to consider giving them some information that they can at least start looking into it and researching it before they respond back to us.
So are you offering an amendment, is what you're doing, that they would send a cover letter along with the easement?
Yes, there ought to be a cover letter, I believe, at least give something. I ain't saying looking at a 6 or 7 page cover letter, but something in there that this, identifying this project, our reasons maybe for doing this project, how it's going to affect them, and for them to really research out the easement language with council
Yeah.
and make up their mind if that's something they want to
You may want
participate
to,
in.
you may want to research this with council.
You know, what's on the floor right now is
Is-
whether or not we put up.
We send out the easement.
Send out the easement.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm asking if that was offered an amendment to send out the easement, but with a cover letter that explains what you're trying to say.
Is that what you, but, yeah, I would, that would be, that, I could make that part of the,
So you want to amend your motion to that?
Yeah, the easement with a cover letter that Mark helps us, write, craft, that, that lets the people know the levity of the easement, seek counsel, whatever, get in touch with us. Give them 6 months, or maybe we need to give them longer, but that should give people out of town, out of the country, long enough to look at it, study it, ask questions, and decide. I just,
I will amend my second on that, yeah. But-
Okay.
but-
Yes?
Okay. But right now, we should be voting on whether, we stop this forward motion for 90 days or whatever. And then we vote on the letter, right? For 6 months.
Well, this is an
I said for
action,
6 months.
this is an action to say we're not doing anything with regards to any of the ECLs, the color of the sand, anything. We're trying to get the pulse of the people that are the property owners that will be impacted. And the amended one now would say, in addition to here's the language in the proposed easement, here are the other facts that go with it. And here's a point of contact that if you've got a question that we can answer,
right, and
here's
we
how to
will
do it.
be glad to spend as much time with you as needed
Yeah.
for you to understand what this is.
Okay. Okay. So we have a motion and a second to send out the easement letter with a cover letter clarifying the facts and to provide a point of contact. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
But have we voted to do the 6 months in abatement? We did, okay,
That was part of what he said that we're going to have to do.
Right.
Okay.
So make sure we got everything covered.
Okay. Well, Mr. Bagby, your next item then is the language of the easement.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there are 2 easements, just to refresh everyone's memory. There's what we call the Western Walton County easement, which, because there is already an erosion control line established in Western Walton County, and because, based on the last survey that we got a couple months ago, somewhere between 100 and 200 feet of state-owned beach seaward of the erosion control line. That easement is worded differently because it incorporates the location of the erosion control line that is already established. And then there's the Eastern County, which is basically east of Topsail Hill Preserve along 30A and in Inlet Beach. There is no erosion control line established there, so that's why the 2 different easements. Other than that, they are the same. There's been requests for one addition, which was to codify, lack of a better term, within the easement, the upland property owner's right to approve vending. We consulted with the attorneys, and we were advised by Mr. Davis that could not be a change. We could not recommend that as a change because some of the owners understand today they can prevent anyone from vending on the beach seaward of their house, even if there were an erosion control line. That's the way the county ordinance reads today. They just wanted assurance that the county wouldn't change its mind or couldn't change its mind 20 or 30 years ago, or 20 or 30 years down the road. And we were advised that that could not be included in the easement. So subject to any other questions or issues with the easements, we ask for your decision.
Germane to the issue.
Commissioners, what do you want to do with regards to the easement language?
Motion to approve the easement language, both for the eastern end and the western end.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Comments? Okay. Public comments on the language of the easements. Ms. Harris, please come in. And yes, I do have your last name spelled for the record already. Thank you.
I'm so proud of you. When I wrote my campaign check to you, I think you should have learned to spell my name. This is not about that, and you can stop me if you want to, but this is for Mark Davis. Mark, you're the attorney here. Have you told them that this depends on state money, matching money, and that if they do this for 6 months, your state matching money, your legislators who get the list today or tomorrow of where we rank for state matching money, that money will be gone because the legislature will be out of session before, and you will have to jump through the hoops again. That's just something I think as a county attorney you need to be sure that the board understands.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other comments? Mr. Hildreth, yes, sir. Mr. Hildreth, this pertains to the language of the easement.
Absolutely. For the record, here you go. Each of the easements, and that's with reference to the language. The easement itself, the language, I've given you in written form the objections to the language. Now, on November the 12th, the people that came to speak to the language did not speak, the 212. That's in the record. Now, as to the language, Mr. Chairman, the language on those 4 pages are the essence and the epitome of socialism, hostility to private property rights, and a redistribution of wealth. Now, anyone, the county attorney or anyone that reads this language can see that the government will control everything. Now, in the language, you're given permission to do something provided that it doesn't interfere with the government. Read the 4 pages. Who has final authority on everything on your lot or your property? The government. Now, that's the language that we object to. If this language is changed to where the landowner has total control, that's fine, but that's not the way it is. Now, as I said, we've been told if you like your property rights, you keep them, but you don't. That's just simply not the truth. So as to the language of this easement, you know, we've had a discussion here before about socialism. I don't call anyone in this room a socialist. But by approving and embracing this easement document, you define yourself as a socialist because this is a socialist document. Now, can we revise the language of this document to where it reflects complete control and ownership in the beachfront property owner? Personally, I don't think it's possible. So it's a bad project, it's a bad easement, a bad document, and frankly, we are asking you to can it. I wouldn't send this easement out to anybody. And I think that the fact that it's such an obnoxious, destructive thing, I think we ought to can it. I don't think you want to fundamentally change Walton County into a socialist county. I don't think that. And I don't think you want to do the things that will result. Loss of property values, loss of tax revenue. Who in the world would come to Walton County to invest money in capitalism in Walton County where private property rights are not honored?
Okay, let me make sure I understand. What you've submitted to us is what your concerns are for the language. Is that correct?
What's that?
What you have submitted to the board here is what your concerns are with regards to the language.
That's correct.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Gary Drake again. Is this, if you vote to send out the language of this easement, is it set in stone? Can it change? And what would be the process? If you send out the easement and you get enough easements for a project, or if you don't get enough easements for a project, but you get questions about the language of the easement, again, can it change? And what would be the process?
Well, Mr. Bagby, if I understand correctly, this all has to be coordinated with both the state and the Army Corps of Engineers with regard to any language or any changes. I would think it, and this goes back to, I think, what Commissioner Meadows started, is it's time to stop kicking the can down the road. Let's put something out there. We've agreed to listen to what the comments were, including yours. Let's put a cover letter out there that also gives language to further identify to everyone that's going to get it. This is what it's all about, and here's the intended language. And my understanding is what you have presented, Mr. Bagby, has been coordinated with both the Army Corps and with the state.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. This is version 12.
And it's been through a number of...
who've been following all the changes?
It's been through public hearings, it's been through workshops. It needs to go out. But we're going to put that cover letter, as you all suggest, to further clarify to the people, this is what it's all about.
And I guess going back, you've already voted, but I guess my suggestion would also be, if you're going to have a letter, our suggestion would be to have an affidavit, but provide a copy of the easement that they would be signing. And since it's set in stone, they can decide then without executing an easement and granting you interest in their property before we know if we have a project or not.
That's what we voted to do, sir.
So, no, I understand. Just so it's set in stone, and I appreciate
Thank you.
Comments. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
I agree that
Name, please.
Sharon Loke Higgins,
You spell your last name, please.
Higgins. I agree a letter should be sent. I agree that a cover letter should be sent. My concerns are who will be developing the cover letter, what it will contain, whether it will cover the ramifications of an ECL versus the mean high water line, because that's the majority of the property that's going to be affected. So, will there be any review of the cover letter? That's my question.
I don't know if that's going to be Mark, if you're going to advise that letter.
I would hope this motion would authorize myself, Mr. Bagby, and the TEC attorney to draft the cover letter. We would want it approved, or at least the general language approved by the commission.
Well, I'll modify my motion to include that.
Will we be able to have any foreknowledge of it? As property owners?
Yeah. This is again, we've workshopped it, we've taken public comment. There's going to be a factual letter that goes out with regards to this. We're going to work with the head of the TDC, with the county attorney, with the TDC attorney to make it there and to give people the opportunity to, again, when you read the easement, if you've got the concerns, there'll be a number you can call or your own attorney you can consult with to get even further amplification. We need to just stop kicking it down.
But you haven't answered my question. Will it explain the difference between having an ECL established and the mean high water line and how that impacts both the accretion in the future?
Yeah, I think it will lay out the facts. But if we put the letter out there for everybody to edit, we'd be here 2018 talking about is there a comma or a period there. So I think, the letter, it'll just be a letter. I mean, I think what's happened, Sharon, is that there's a group of people who have all the names of all the people who have oceanfront property. And they've already sent out a mass mailing to them. I'm sure that they'll do that again. So they will be hearing from both sides. They'll hear the county's version, if that's what you want to call it, and then they'll hear from the opposers, like they did before. So I don't think that the letter is the end-all, be-all. So, no.
Probably not. It just
No,
would
I don't-
shorten the process if people understood and could make a decision and not have to go and pay counsel.
And not have to go.
In other words, if you're sending something out, and one of the things mentioned was you may wish to seek counsel on this. If it were clear, then
You can't-
people
you
wouldn't
can't-
have to all
you
seek
can't-
counsel.
You can't make this clear. I mean, you can't make it clear. I'm serious. You cannot make it clear. You have to talk to people about it. You have to explain it to them. They have to ask questions. You have to make it clear. 2-page cover letter, it ain't gonna do it. And I don't care what you say in the cover letter, it isn't gonna do it. You need further explanation, and people are gonna seek that out. I'm assuming that people are smart, and they will seek that out. They're not just gonna sign an easement away and send it. So, assume people are bright and they're smart and they care about their beachfront property and they're going to do their due diligence.
I would love to assume that's
We can't make people do the right thing.
No, I understand that. I just
We're
thought.
doing the best we can.
We can't write a magic letter that is going to say everything and anything to everybody that's going to satisfy you. I don't believe we can do that.
It's not just to satisfy me, Cynthia.
Well-
It's to say, if it were clear enough, people might not have to seek counsel, but then, if it's not, then I think that suggestion should be left in. You may wish to seek counsel.
If it's my property and it involves me, I'm gonna ask somebody smarter than I am, and I think anybody in this room will do the same thing. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, call for the question.
Okay,
I agree.
we have a call for the question. We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
let's get through it. Let's get to a Jim, then we'll take a break.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the next item on the agenda is the request to authorize the TDC to contract with the American Governmental Services for additional ownership and encumbrances. Reporting
What does that
on the
mean?
easements, basically the firm down in this is the firm down in Tampa that did the research a while back when the Corps' land attorneys and everybody went through the information that they were given. They found a couple of discrepancies, and this is in a not to exceed amount. We don't think it will get close to that, but there are some changes. Properties have sold, ownership relations have changed, and so they just have to go back and clean up who
And then send
they're
a
mailing to.
This will facilitate making sure the letter that we just
Goes out.
voted on goes to the right place.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further comment up here? Any public comment about that? Yes, sir.
Jim, as long as Jim's up there, Jim, I'd like for you to officially announce to the board, to the public, the date that those easements actually go out.
Yes, ma'am.
Because
I will.
there may be some lag
Okay.
between tonight and.
There'll be a lot of, well, we will bring back the letter for you to, the cover letter for you to approve before those easements go out. So that, when you approve that cover letter, we will send the easements out as soon thereafter as we can.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, let's please be considerate of everybody that's coming to the podium. Thank you.
Hey, thank you for your time. I'm Jason White, W-H-I-T-E. I'm with Alice Beach. Commissioner Meadows, you mentioned all these letters going out. I will tell you, we have not received, or I've not received a single letter from anybody about this. I received emails, but a physical letter from a concerned party
Well,
or the county.
Email would be communication about
Okay.
it from some people who are, who want to get some information out there. That's what I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
When y'all do this extended title search, find out who these property owners are, will that information be publicly available?
Would have to be. It'd be public record.
The title searches are public record. Yes.
So if we wanted to get a copy of those addresses and who those properties owners, we could get that.
Yes, let me The short answer is yes. Now, we're talking well over 1,000 title searches. We had a public records request for them, and when they saw the size and the amount of them, they obviously didn't want them. So if you're looking for just the addresses, there's a way, I understand, to get those, or the names and the addresses of the beachfront property owners. There's a way to do that through the property appraiser's office. So that might be an easier route.
Well, I'll tell you where I think I'm headed is we've spent a lot of time, and we've met with all of y'all about this, and we've hired engineers and attorneys to look at it. And I think there's some perspectives that haven't been really brought up. I've brought them up with y'all, and we've brought them up in here before. But like Commissioner Meadows said, there's so much. This could be a 20-page cover letter, and I would say that maybe it requires that. But I think that there are so many things that are wrapped up in this easement that we are probably going to take that upon ourselves to send a letter just saying what our perspective is.
Okay, but now, the issue in front of the board right now
No, I understand.
is to pay for this.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that was publicly available information.
It is. It is.
Thank you.
It is, but you have to pay for it, right?
Well, we dealt with the public records request for.
But you can get it from the property appraiser for free.
It might be.
I know, but if y'all are getting additional information to make sure your addresses are right, I would like to have that same information that y'all are using.
We can help.
There's one issue there that Mark. One of the issues, many that we ran into last time, is that information actually goes to the Army Corps of Engineers, who doesn't have a sunshine law that they fall under, and so we had to pull it. We had to pull it from them to give it to the people, to provide it to the attorneys to make sure. So there may be a little lag. That information doesn't actually come to us.
It's also one of the things we ran into was we can't release if we have the information. There are some addresses for some people we cannot release, and so we have to go through every name, make sure they don't fall under that exemption. And we were talking to, I don't remember who made the public records request now, and we were talking to them about the cost of doing that, the time associated with it. They came up with a better way than doing it through us, just saying.
Because we're talking thousands of dollars for us to do.
But we would be, obviously we wouldn't shut the
We'll
door
help
on
you
them.
any way
I
we
mean,
can, though, yeah.
Come see us.
All right,
Come see us.
Mr. Hildreth, do you have a comment about this contract? No more socialism,
With
please.
reference to the motion, the second title and encumbrances, let me ask the county attorney, Mark Davis. In Alabama, I know for a fact that under a mortgage encumbrance, title passes to the mortgagee. Is that the case in Florida, Mr. Mark Davis?
I understand equitable title does.
No, I don't mean that. In Alabama, legal title passes to the mortgagee. The equitable title stays with the mortgagor. How is it in Florida?
It's not that way in Florida.
Well, how is it?
It's a mortgage interest in the property.
Just a mortgage interest?
Yes, sir. It's a
Okay,
security.
my second question with reference to title and encumbrance, which is the motion. Mr. Davis, are you going to require the mortgagee to sign a waiver or release or some instrument since they have a mortgage interest in the property, a title interest?
Mr. Hildreth, that's not the question that's in front of the board right now. The
Yes,
question,
it is.
No, sir. Excuse me. The question in front of the board is to authorize the contract to update and make sure that the people that need to get the letters are going to get them.
But in the encumbrance, can he answer the question, Mr. Chairman?
No.
No.
Why not?
We're dealing with approving the amendment to this contract to update it.
Can we get an answer on, is the mortgagee
Mr.
going to
Hildreth?
be
Mr. Hildreth,
notified?
I
Mr.
call the
Hildreth?
question.
Okay, question on the call. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the screening committee that you established met and is making the recommendation that you reappoint Pam Aver, Gary Brillmeyer, and Jim Richard to the Tourist Development Council for their terms that expired 12/31/14.
Did we have anybody else who was interested in these positions?
We did have some other names. Yes, ma'am. I don't remember them
One
right
of
off
the
the top
things
of my
about
head.
these people too is they had kind of just gotten on
Okay.
because of all the, the catching up. And so they had only been on, so they've been trained, they know a lot. So I kind of concurred with the.
Okay. Is that your motion?
That's my motion. We go ahead and appoint these people, Pam Avery, Gary Billmeyer, and Jim
I'll
Richard.
second your motion.
Have a motion and a second. Any comments? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Let's take a
Any-
15-minute break.
Any opposed?
No.
Any updates real quick?
Real quick updates, in November, we were up 31.63% in bed tax, church development tax collections. For the fiscal year, we're up 28.83%. The amount of money in November was $493K. I have talked with John Brown, the Lands Program Administrator, about parking at the trailheads in South Walton, and we're now to the point where we have to talk with John Sabo, the district manager, and I left him a voicemail to do that as part of our ongoing parking initiative.
Thank you. We're going to take a 15-minute break. Can we please be seated? Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Commissioners. I have a couple of 2 or 3 items on the agenda. First item.
Microphone.
Microphone, sorry. The first item is a request from an attorney, John Mead.
Could we have quiet in the room, please? And out in the hall?
I'll start again. The first item, Commissioners, is a request from John Mead, who is an attorney for a person who owns a house and real property located at 917 Scenic Gulf Drive, Miramar Beach, Florida. They're asking the Commission to agree to an abatement of code fines for a period of 90 days to allow a new owner of property to bring the property into compliance. And just by way of...
Mr. Davis, I'm sorry, I can't hear till they hush. I'm deaf in one ear and can't hear out the other one, so.
Don't shut up out there.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Just by way of background, this is a piece of property that was subject to a code enforcement complaint. The code enforcement complaint ended up in a code enforcement lien. The lien was subject of a foreclosure. By that I mean the lien itself was a second or third down the line lien on some on the real property. When the first mortgage was was foreclosed, we lost obviously our lien rights against the property. The new owner of the property is basically asking us to abate any new code action for a period of 90 days to allow them to correct the code violation. Now, that doesn't mean we would still have the money judgment itself against the original code violator, but we just don't have a lien on the property. In return for the 90-day abatement, they've agreed to pay the cost of the original code enforcement action. They don't have to do that. That's just something they've asked to do for our 90-day abatement, and we have estimated the cost at somewhere around $8,000. So if they don't correct it within the 90 days, or then we could restart the code process to be able to reimpose the lien, assuming the code violation is still present. So that's a request, and we'd ask you to approve the request.
What's the wishes of the board?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Any public comment? Mr. Hudson.
Well, Bob is coming up here. Question for council. The original monies that on the original owner, the code fines, we have a mechanism to go forward to try and recoup them from him?
Yes, sir. It's essentially works as a final judgment, a money final judgment. It attaches, obviously, to other properties as the original code violator may have had. We have actually, because of this, started looking at ways to try to collect that judgment against other property for this gentleman. We had not done that, and this is one of many of fairly large code judgments that we have out there that we've been collecting the last 6-8 months.
What is the amount?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that, and I forgot to look. I want to say it's over $100,000. It's a significant amount of money.
In the event that there's no other property, how do we attach that to another property?
I have a drawer full of judgments in my office I can't collect. It's one of the, I'm just going to be blunt with you, it's one of the harsh things about practicing law in Florida is we have this is a significant state. If you want to be bankrupt, or for a nice way of putting it, is it's very difficult to collect judgments in Florida. There are lots of exemptions. But we'll do everything within our power to collect it against.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
For the record, my name is Bob Hudson, Hudson, and my question goes back to the TDC and the action that you took tonight, and I think you took what I would call a good step forward to try and determine where people here truly want to go. But if I understood Commissioner Meadows' original motion and what passed, you were hitting the pause button. And my question is, other than the expenditure for the title search, the mailing cost, did you basically stop expending dollars on this project beyond those two things?
That was my understanding of the motion.
For all intents and
I think there are some things that would, some things that would have to be wrapped up or, zipped up or put, I don't think you could say, we're not gonna spend another dollar, we gotta finish paying Brad. There are things that we have to do.
He provides services, he provides services.
Okay, we're beyond that, and if you want to go further in that, we can do it under public comment. But right now, we have a motion and a second on the floor with regards to the code enforcement fine being accepted as part of this. And you'll have a chance to under public comment. Any further comment on that? We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners, and thank you, Mr. Meade. Next item I have is we are requesting the Commission to hold 2 executive sessions on January 27th at 10 a.m. First is to discuss a proposed offer of settlement we have received in Yellow House for 30A LLC v. Walton County, case number 2014 CA 488, and another offer of settlement we've received from the Abbott Revocable Trust, among others, versus Olson Associates of Northwest Florida, among others, including Walton County, case number 2007-889. I would anticipate both of those would only take about a half hour each.
Can you refresh my memory on both of them?
The first case is Yellow House is at the corner, I never remember the name of the road, Grayton Beach Road and Highway 30-A.
Blue Mountain Road.
I said
okay.
The ice cream shop. We've been sued. The allegations are that we denied a land use change without any basis, and there's an offer to settle that lawsuit. The second one is the old Driftwood case that we've been brought back into, and we've got an offer to settle from one of the.
I have a question. It's scheduled for 10 a.m., which is in the middle of a board meeting.
Or soon thereafter. Our thought was we'd just have it at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
And it should say.
End of next meeting on the 27th?
Yes, and I don't anticipate either one of them taking very long.
Yeah, that worked for me too.
Do we have a motion yet?
No.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Commissioners, the next item is number 3, which has been removed from the agenda. The next item is number 4, request to approve the amended lease agreement with the Walton County Chamber of Commerce Foundation at the New Town Center. Commissioners, you may recall the county leased to the Chamber of Commerce under a 99-year lease the property where the Chamber of Commerce building is located. The lease was used as security interest for a loan for them to build the building. The bank, in order to comply with some changes in state law, has asked that we make one small change to the lease, which is essentially to allow them, with our written permission, by the way, to enter into agreements that they could possibly sublease part of the building. And that's all the amendment would be with the lease, is to allow them to do that with our written permission.
Was that from the bank or from?
Yeah, actually, the bank is requesting this, yes, the mortgage holder is requesting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion or comments? Any public comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Nay.
3-2. Motion carries.
Next item, and this is the one we added very, very late, and I apologize to you for that. I try my best to avoid that, but we,
Go ahead, Ronnie.
I'm going to hand you, and it's a document called a Certificate of Entitlement. Commissioners, as you know, we are engaged in a fairly large construction project at the Mossy Head Industrial Park. That construction project, part of the way we are saving some money is the county is allowed to buy materials directly for the contractor, and then the savings that are made on the sales tax eventually becomes a deductive change order on the project. There's been a change in the Florida Administrative Code which now requires for every invoice or purchase order submitted for that deduction. In other words, when they go out and buy the material under a purchase order, there has to be attached to it this certificate of entitlement, which essentially sets out why we're entitled to not pay the sales tax on the particular item. We don't have anyone who's ever been authorized to sign the certificate of entitlement, and I'm asking you to authorize the finance officer or finance CFO or the purchasing agent to sign that on behalf of the county each time those invoices go out, so long as we qualify each time.
We could do both, authorize both.
You certainly
could.
could.
One's sick or whatever.
I would actually suggest that, yes, sir.
Yeah, but I would suggest that Melissa be the main one, and then only if she was out would it go to the purchasing agent.
Yes.
I'll second that motion.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
So is it either or is it both signatures?
You start with Melissa. If she's not
So
there,
one
then
signature
it's
is required.
Commissioner,
yeah, let me make sure we're clear. I think I misspoke when we were continuing the Empire Truck ordinance. We're actually going to I said workshop. We're actually going to have a public hearing on the matter. We advertised it for a public hearing, and it's just advertised on the wrong day.
We have advertised it for the 27th.
Yes. Okay.
And the ordinance, though, is the same one that you submitted?
Yes, ma'am.
Downloaded and all that?
Yes. Although I found a typo that I'll correct before.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. Commissioner Meadows.
Yes, I have a request. We've been getting some letters, and there is some available funding out there. The Florida Trail System, from what I understand, I think is terminates at Camp Helen. So we have an opportunity to connect Tampucci Trail, which is really just another name for our multi-use path. That's what it's named, but nobody really calls it that. But that's the official name. To I'm requesting that we seek funding to connect the two together. It would be a section from on East 98 from probably 30A down to Camp Helen, but it would connect in with the Florida Trail System, and we could probably get the funding from the state. We just need the commission to either put it on our lobbying list for the state or to contact our legislative delegation, which is kind of one and the same. So I think I just need consensus maybe that we could put it on our lobbying list and see if we can get the money to put that section in.
Yeah, I don't think it needs a motion.
No, we can actually, the 20, when are we doing that?
The first meeting in February.
Yeah.
We're doing that first week.
Yep.
Yeah, first meeting in February, so we'll put that on our list to be sure to include it.
Okay.
If I understand it correctly, Commissioner, St. Joe in their project down there on that east end was also going to tie in, but we're trying to pick up east of where they are.
Yeah, we're
on
gonna actually
south.
pick up on 98 on the south side of 98, I believe, and that would connect it in. I'm not sure where St. Joe's, I think St. Joe's connects around to the northeast, but I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. So that would be a good addition to that area. The second thing I have is, I met with Camille Tharp from Government Services. I think I was the last one to meet with her. She indicated that the numbers were there for South Walton. The numbers would probably be there for 331. So asking the board to direct legal to go ahead and draft the ordinances and let us kind of get started on those TIF districts. and mechanisms for financing, and then we go forward with the resolutions, which I understand contain all the details, like percentages and that kind of thing.
And I think it's important to help get the stormwater issues addressed, and we've got to keep going forward. So I think that's important. So is that your motion?
My motion, yes.
Second.
For discussion.
Yes, sir.
In my meeting with Camille, you're right. She did advocate that it would be a good thing to do on the south end, 38, 98, there. But she didn't advocate doing it for 331 north of the bay.
You know, when I met with her, she said that she did advocate that. She said it's not there now, but she said go ahead and get it started, and that it would eventually take off.
That's my understanding as well, and that you didn't have to undertake the project north of the bay, but as long as you got at least this defined as to when the starting point would be, and you could accumulate as a fund so that as you got to that point, you could undertake some of the issues that we're trying to accomplish along the 331 corridor.
Okay.
And that's what I understood too. It's like putting money in the bank ahead of time.
Yes, ma'am.
That we could actually shape our.
Whereas the ones for the stormwater in particular, probably we could start down that road. We would have to just be a little bit more patient for the 331.
And Commissioners, we will use Camille and those folks' expertise in terms of help drafting the ordinance, but we'll certainly get that process started, yes.
Any further discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Anything else, Commissioner?
Nothing else?
Thank you. Ms. Commander?
Nothing, sir.
Ms. Jones?
Nothing.
Mr. Chapman?
Nothing.
I have nothing. Additional public comments. Mr. Hudson, did you want to come back up?
For the record, my name is Bob Hudson, Hudson. Mr. Chairman, I want you to understand I was standing back here doing double backflips before you chose to take your 15-minute break, and I
Sorry, I thought you were spotting flies again.
So all I was trying to do was save myself a little bit of time and everything, but the question still is there. I do understand that you have some what I'd call trickle projects that are going to have to do that, but I'd kind of watch those types of things for the Taxpayers Association, those expenditures, and I just wanted to make sure that I clearly understood that basically you hit the stop button on those expenditures on that. It's hard to back away from a project that you've already spent the amount of money that you have spent on. And I think wisely today you chose to listen to the people and see what the chances and possibilities were. So if that's your understanding, that's what I'll approach it with.
Yeah. One of the things, that needed to be done soon, if we were going to kind of march forward with this, was the resurveying of the mean high water line. And so that, as I mentioned, that we would not go forward with that survey until all this was worked out. And if it wasn't worked out, then we would need to do the survey, from what I understand.
Correct.
So that money would not be spent. And any other steps that would be taken would be put in abeyance, and those monies would not be spent on that. But I couldn't quantify them, and I couldn't exactly ID them for you right now.
Right,
but
and I
Jim
understand
probably
you.
could.
You're going to have ongoing issues with your coastal engineers. I
Right.
clearly understood that. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Any other public comment? Okay, we now move into Planning and Development Services.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. We have 4 items. We have 2 general items and then 2 QJ items. The 2 general items Matt Carpenter will handle. I'll ask Matt to come up.
Commissioners, I think Mac may say this to you, but I want to make sure you understand the overlay district is not a quasi-judicial matter. It was
Yes, that should be a legislative item.
That's correct.
Thank you, Commissioners. Matt Carpenter, CARPENTER for the Planning Department. First item we have is a request to allow us to propose modifications to Chapter 7 and Chapter 13 of the Land Development Code to support the opportunity to have transit available in South Walton. Presently, these signs would be considered off-premise signs and would be prohibited. But in support of possible transit, we'd like to propose that we amend the code so that if we do have a transit opportunity, we'll have signage available so folks will know actually where the stops will be.
Matt, just so I'm clear, and maybe the commissioners too, you're not proposing any amendments tonight, just the opportunity to move that process forward and bring back to the board what that would look like.
Yes, asking for the opportunity to propose some changes to land development code that would allow for transit stop signs.
Motion?
No, just the direction? Yes, you got it.
Move in that direction, sir, with the directional signs.
Thank you. Next item, at the Mossy Head Industrial Park, we have the sleep-in under construction, and they've applied for a sign variance under the covenants and restrictions, and those covenants allow this board to authorize a variance from our standard sign code. They're proposing an 80-foot tall pylon sign, their main ID sign, with their sleep-in sign, and a 12 by 6, I believe, reader board underneath that. They're also proposing about 304 square feet of signage on that, including those two items. Those would be consistent with a sign that tall. These are not nearly as tall as the Love signs that we previously approved. This is an interstate visibility location. The third request they're asking for is to allow their sleep-in building sign to be taller or to be located on the building higher than 18 feet. 18 feet is presently our maximum height, position, location on the building.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, the next item is a QJ item.
Anyone who, we're talking about the Regal at Seagrove. Okay, I just want to make sure. Anyone anticipates testifying regarding the matter of the Regal at Seagrove, would you please stand and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give before this board will be the truth?
I do.
Does anyone have any objections to the notice for this particular quasi-judicial matter? Hearing none. Commissioners, anyone had any ex parte contacts with anyone regarding this quasi-judicial matter? There are none. Before we start that hearing, the request permission to advertise for a public hearing to consider an amendment to the outdoor events ordinance. I was going to ask you to table that.
We did that earlier.
Yeah,
Okay.
they've already
We did that
okay.
upfront.
Just want to make sure.
We want to have a public workshop.
You want to schedule that now?
You want to schedule
Let's
this?
bring it back next meeting to get the schedule, so we got time to coordinate our calendars on that.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Dice.
Mr. Chairman, this item is the Regal at Seagrove. It's a 31-unit condominium, and obviously in Seagrove Beach. I'll ask Tim Brown, our planner who reviewed this project, to come out and give you a brief overview.
Good evening, Tim Brown with Planning and Development. This is a major development order application requesting the approval to construct a 31-unit residential condominium building and associated infrastructure on 3.92 acres with a future land use of neighborhood infill. Project is located approximately 1 mile east of the County Road 395 and County Road 30A intersection on the south side of County Road 30A. I'll entertain any questions that you may have for the project.
Is the applicant present? Do you wish to make any comments?
We can just like to do just a very general overview and then answer any questions or comments. Good evening, Commission. I'm David Smith with Interlight Engineering Corporation, and I'm also here with Roger Godwin. He's with DAG Architects, the project architect. And we've reviewed the staff report, agreed with the conditions, and we can just do a very brief overview of the project and then answer any questions the Commission and or the audience may have. The Regal is a 31-unit single-family residential condominium, and the property is located about a mile east of the 395-30A intersection, and it's currently vacant and wooded. And I'll just point to the site plan here. The building is configured in the center of the property, and Roger will speak more about the building here in a minute. We do have a full facility proposed in the rear of the building. There's a wetland in the northeast corner, which we're staying completely out of the wetland. We're not touching the wetland. 2 driveway connections to County Road 30A with a drop-off area here on the north side of the building, and the parking is subterranean in a garage underneath the building. So the last thing I'll point out real quick is the line that runs east and west through the project is the DEP coastal construction control line. So the project is north of that line. We are not south of the coastal construction control line, with the exception of a beach walk that will go down to the beach. That's the only construction that will go south of that line. So the rest of the construction is north of that coastal construction control line.
Can you explain how you're handling your stormwater runoff and where it's going?
Yes, sir. We're doing a series of exfiltration that's located in this drive here. There's a retention pond here and a dry pond here down by the wetland area. And we do meet a 100-degree storm event. We've coordinated with the county's consultant, Preble Ridge. We do meet that event. So we did want to go ahead and do that.
Do you have sump pumps in the basement parking area that take that water collection and move it somewhere?
Well, it pumps it up into the pond.
Okay, thank you.
And then now I'll turn it over to Roger to do a brief overview of the building, and then we'll be more than happy to answer any questions or comments that you may have.
I'm Roger Godwin with DAG Architects.
You'll spell your last name, please?
Godwin.
Thank you.
One of the key things about the project was the uniqueness of the wetlands on the site and also the coastal line and the additional buildings surrounding it. One of the things we wanted to do to make sure is that we maintained as much of the visibility from the 30-acre view corridor. We met that requirement, but also just to show you a little bit, by angling the building back, we wanted to make sure that we were get as much view corridor for the residents and people driving on 30A. So this dimension through here is much greater than that. To open that up, and also pulled the building, instead of building it on the coastal development line, we actually pulled it back so that it allowed more view and more openness to the beach side of that. So it also allowed, if you're coming down the street here next to the town front, to leave that view corridor open. So by pulling the building in the center, we left a view corridor for that side. Because of the wetlands here, you can see there's very little bit of surface parking or anything associated with that. So it's really just the building, the rest of it's all vegetated and open to the side of that part. The style of the building is really flat roof are all stayed within the height limits and the requirements of that.
Does anyone wish to speak in opposition?
Just a couple questions.
Go ahead.
The drainage, is this in the one of the 58 critical flooded drainage basins?
I don't know.
Y'all know that? You know that?
No, ma'am, I do not know.
And I don't know if it is either. There's 58 that we've identified. I think that projects forward from here should, identify if they are in fact in one of the 58 critical flooded areas. Because I think that's important. We're looking at this. The other thing about this is that it has underground parking.
Yes, ma'am.
Where's the groundwater level? Where's the water table at this point?
The parking has there's drains and sump pumps that then pump the water up into the retention facilities. So the water is being conveyed to the stormwater management facilities.
Stormwater is below right now, see that this is a 31 feet at this end of the site. It goes down to 24 feet on this end of the site. The parking garage, the lower level of it, there is, at this one corner is the only place where it actually comes close to touching the water table. Everything else is well below that. We are designing it so that there's pressure pop-off and some pumping related to, if there is any water event, to be able to take it out.
Okay, so you don't expect the parking underneath to flood?
No.
No, ma'am.
Okay. The driveway, the two accesses, I wish y'all could just use one access because you're in a location where it's you've got the 7-Eleven there with all the gas tanks, you've got people crossing the street there, and you've got other driveways, and you've got we're adding 2 more driveways to that confusion. My only comment would be, couldn't you just go with one driveway so as to not exacerbate the traffic problem out in that area?
But the thought is that the primary driveway that will be used is the western driveway that goes down to the garage.
Yeah.
And that front drive will be used for drop-offs and will help traffic flow. People do want to drop off at the front of the building, and it'll be, a convenience too. With larger vehicles will go that way as well that can't go down the hill into the garage. So I don't in my opinion, I don't see both drives being, it's going to be the western drive, but that other drive is beneficial, to help our traffic flow for drop-offs and larger vehicles.
I mean, it helps the internal flow, the external flow, with all that conflicts going on in that one little intersection there is, in my opinion, just makes the problem on 38 worse. When you have the more driveways you have, the more conflicts you have. So that would be one of my comments to look at. When we look at the traffic congestion on 38, we could do some things now that would help that. And so I think we ought to start looking at that.
Could one be Commissioner, could one be an entrance and one an exit?
I don't know, you have to ask them as far as, but one is a drop off. It's like one is a drop off. One would take people dropping off, and they can actually go down to the end, turn around, and go back out the same entrance, in my opinion. But I just think we're going to need to start looking at those access management issues, because we just cannot have a driveway every 100 feet on 38 anymore. It's not working, but that would be my comment, is just limit it to one driveway.
The other comment I'll make is the fact that that front drive is also there for the fire truck, for fire protection. So again, the larger vehicle can move across the northern portion of the building in the event that did occur, and then can exit out that eastern driveway.
We create a driveway, an area that they can pull in and actually turn around and create a lot more pervious area to the side, and pushing it deeper into it. So that was really our reason to try to minimize any impervious construction. So.
Well, not really, because you could still put that pavement, but you could lop off that pavement and not make it connect to 38, and then that would be your turnaround. So you wouldn't really have to do a whole lot, but.
The challenge would be the larger vehicles, like a garbage truck or a fire truck or something of that nature. To turn that vehicle around would be very difficult in that area.
I know, but we can't design all of 38 with multiple roadways just to get a truck in there occasionally that might be bigger than the, might have a little bit of trouble turning around. That's my opinion on how we could start leaving some of the congestion on 38, some of the conflicts. It's up to the board.
What is the wishes of the board?
I'll make a motion to approve with the conditions, but also to maybe take another look at the entrance, see if you can make one entrance and one an exit, or try, because Commissioner Meadows is right, until we have the money to redo 38, we've got to look at how we can minimize traffic at all times.
Commissioner, I don't want to interfere, but this is a quasi-judicial. We probably should take public comment before we make motions.
Okay, I thought we'd asked for anybody speaking opposition.
Oh, okay. I just saw a hand. I'm sorry.
Okay, come on up.
I just want to make sure you were sworn previously.
No other hands coming up.
I was not.
Okay. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give before this board will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Bob Brooke, B-R-O-O-K-E, Walton County resident. I just have one question. Can you tell me what the maximum design occupancy is for the condo units?
31 units.
The 31 units, if they're 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 5-bedroom, what's the maximum design occupancy?
So they're 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 3.5 bathrooms.
Okay, 31 of them, approximately 100 people, a little less than 100.
If everyone's in every bed, correct.
Well, if there's only one person in each bed. Okay, could be more, so it could be 200, 300 people.
Right.
Thank you.
It's really basically the 3 bedrooms, you're going to have like 20 people.
Any other public comment on it?
Ma'am, were you previously sworn? I didn't remember swearing you in.
No, you didn't.
Did you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
My name is Marie Carrera, C-A-R-R-E-R-A. I'm board president at Beechcrest Condominium, which is next door to the proposed development site. And I appreciate the questions that are being raised about the drainage issues and the water and the sump pumps and the water runoff, because we have serious concerns about that. I don't know if you, David, or Roger have ever been to Beechcrest or Legacy on the other side of the proposed development site during a big rainstorm down here, but we are ankle deep and sometimes knee deep in water in the parking lots there because drainage is a serious issue along 30A. Everybody knows that. So I'm concerned about the underground parking, the runoff that's going to be in the wetland area. That's an enormous amount of water that's going to have to be handled on that property. And as neighbors, we're very concerned about that. So, thank you.
How does your condominium handle their water?
We have drainage ditches for that, but it's always a challenge when there's a big rain. Last July when we had a big rain, we were literally knee-deep in water on one side of the parking lot. So it's in Legacy, we've always noticed that it's really, their parking lot is underwater all the time when it rains. Thank you.
Would you like to address that?
Yes, sir. I think the county's done a great job of implementing stormwater management standards. I'm not sure what Beechcrest has in the way of stormwater management, but we meet all the requirements of the code. We actually meet a 100-year storm event, which means we're retaining above and beyond the minimum code requirement that we have to do. So, and the other thing is the fact with our subterranean garage, we're minimizing the amount of impervious surface by having open-air parking lots that would contribute more stormwater runoff to the wetland area. So we are retaining a 100-year storm event. We've modeled this, we've designed this to minimize any impacts, and we're retaining our water, and we're meeting and exceeding the county requirements.
So are you designing the 100-year storm because it's a closed basin?
We're designing to the 100-year storm event just to minimize impacting any areas outside of our property. Our water actually flows to the east once it goes to the wetland area, which does continue to flow away. But
so it is not a closed.
That's correct. It goes down to the east, down 38.
Down 38, which has no drainage infrastructure whatsoever. So I think that's the kicker, is that these are downstream properties. They receive all the water coming off of the northern properties and 38, which has no drainage. So I think we need to take a strong look at approving a lot of high density projects that are and I think this is in one of those 58 critically flooded areas because that intersection's always flooded when it rains. Flooding downstream properties.
I got a question, and not necessarily for you, it's for either Mac or Wayne. What is our normal standard of stormwater retention? Is it based on a 25-year event, 50, or what is it? What is
25 years.
25. And so you're 4 times that.
Unless we're in a closed basin, and then it's 100 years long.
Okay. Is there anything for the applicant? And following up on Commissioner Commander, instead of having 2 ingress driveways, one of them couldn't be a exit only. And the reason I'm kind of looking at it, Commissioner Meadows, is that in the event that we had a fire truck have to pull down in front of here, he'd either have to back out or somehow, hopefully, he could turn around. And this would just provide an easier access for him to come down out and get on 38. That's the only concern, is these large vehicles, whether it's delivery vehicles or fire trucks, is the main thing, is that service there.
So it would be a one-way driveway.
Right, you come in, I would think probably the best one to use the west entrance in, and the east would be an exit only.
I spoke to the developer representative, and they're okay with doing that.
Okay with that?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask a question about when you construct an underground garage on basically sand, what happens to the surrounding properties? How deep do you have to dig, and what kind of what kind of impact does it have on surrounding property, especially when you're on sand?
Well, number one, the entire building, including the garage and the pool, would actually be on piling. So there'll be autocast pilings that'll go down. So the impact to any surrounding, we're not driving piles, would be autocast piles. So the displacement of that, and because of the property does slope from 31 down to 24, we're really not digging out very much for the garage. I mean, we're actually just following the slope of the ground for that part of it. So the displacement of sand and stuff, but it will be built, you know, structurally it'll be built on pilings, so that the garage and everything, the displacement or any disruption to any part of that would be, and even if the house is built along that area now, will have to be built on pilings.
How deep are the pilings sunk?
But structurally, we're looking at the columns, and the columns will probably be 35 feet. You know, the actual test borings will tell exactly what that, but they're going to be in that range.
Okay.
Any other public comment or question? What's the wishes of the board?
Motion to approve the project with the, whatever conditions already put by the planning commission, and to make a one entrance, ingress and the other egress.
Second. Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Chairman, the next item is a legislative item, is the Great Beach Neighborhood Plan. I'll ask Vivian Chamel to give a brief presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. The Great Beach Neighborhood Planning Group has worked long and hard to come up with this plan. The primary purpose of the plan is to preserve the residential and historic character of the neighborhood and past development patterns and land uses. On January 28, 2013, the Neighborhood Planning Group registered with the county. The initial ballot of interest was counted on March 25, 2013, with 184 qualified ballots, being one vote per parcel number that were received back, of which 169 voted to proceed with developing a plan. The percentage voting in favor was 92%. On October 1st, 2014, the percentage of ballots received that are in favor of the proposed plan that you have before you now is 97%. So that is based on ballots received in both cases. At the December 11th Planning Commission meeting, the board voted unanimously to recommend the plan to the BCC with 5 conditions. Planning staff agrees with conditions number 1, 3, 4, and 5. These are located on page 3 of your staff report. And these items could be incorporated into the plan. For condition number 3, which is regarding freestanding signs, per Billy Bezette, representative of the group, the number of rental signs shall be 1 and shall not be greater than 4 square feet. Item number 2 is addressed in staff findings of fact, which I will go over momentarily. The staff report basically contains an abbreviated version of the plan and briefly describes each section of the plan. The sections of note are numbers 7, 14, and 18, being setbacks, outdoor seating, and rental signs. Number 7 on page 4 of the staff report is regarding setbacks, and basically what they are requesting is that instead of the standard 15-foot standard county rear setback to be allowed to be 5 foot, and that would be on the properties that are on the alleyways. There have been a couple of variance requests go to the variance board to allow for this, and they've both been approved. The variance board has recommended putting that language into a neighborhood plan.
Vivian, are those alleys, are they identified on a map? Because I think that would be important to have, because, in the future, people, because some sometimes it may not be clear. But to those who identify.
We could highlight the alleys on the map.
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, they're basically, let's see, Garfield Street and Banfield Street. There are, or no, Cottage Street. Back up.
Anyway,
They're
they
the-
could be identified
they
on
could-
the map. And
yes.
they would go with the plan. That would be,
Yes,
that would
yes.
be helpful.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
agree with that. And the next standard of note was neighborhood commercial outdoor seating parking standards. That's on page 5 of my staff report. And what the neighborhood is requesting is that for any properties that are located in the neighborhood commercial land use category, and that they be, for any new uses or any property that changes from one land use to the neighborhood commercial land use category, that whenever if there's a restaurant and they're wanting to have outdoor seating, that the outdoor seating be counted in the parking standards requirements. We know that there's been an issue with that throughout South Walton, and so they would like to make that a standard. It is basically the same standard that was put into the Point Washington neighborhood plan.
Vivian, one other question while you're on that subject about the parking. How do we know, how does anybody know when somebody changes their use?
That's a really good question.
And who is going to enforce that? Who's going to go over there and we ran into this before in a lot of different places. So how's that going to work? I mean, I think I'm in favor of people having to provide parking, but people, for instance, the bed and breakfast on 30A. I drove by there the other day. It's now a cafe and a bar, a lounge or something. I don't know. But I thought, wow, that's interesting. I would think. And you know how hard it is to go back and try to get people to do that, especially if they don't have the room on the property. But Max, did you want to address that?
The business you're referring to will be working its way through the code enforcement process. But you're exactly right. There are a lot of times when we don't know when a business has changed from one particular use or another. The certificate of land use compliance effort that is part of the land development code does mandate that all businesses obtain a certificate of land use compliance. We have not had universal compliance with that section of the code.
Is there any, what do you do if somebody doesn't comply? Is there any,
Well, how we typically find out about this is they need to do some kind of interior remodel. They need some kind of permit from the county. And if you come to the planning department applying for something other than a development order, a certificate of land use compliance is requested to determine that, yes, you can actually do that use there, or you're approved for that use in that location. If they don't have that, we start them with that process before we proceed with any other permitting. But it's a difficult circumstance when we have a restaurant appear in what used to be a retail store. Fortunately, at least in the south part of the county, we get a lot of help from our residents, whether we actually need it or not. But we have...
And that's the problem. It splits neighborhoods up. One neighbor has to call and complain, and we have to get involved, and everybody gets mad at us, and everybody gets mad at them. It's just not working.
And Commissioner, I can tell you, as Max said, if they require a permit, that's fairly simple. We can monitor that because we won't issue a permit until they have a clock. If they're not doing any interior modeling, not requiring any permits, it is really a complaint-driven process as far as, or something we have to observe if it's changed.
Wouldn't an occupational license
Yes, ma'am.
Wouldn't that help?
Typically, yes, ma'am. Typically, occupational license, business license, that's how, many times in many other jurisdictions, that's how you sort of monitor new businesses opening up and are they meeting code or not, but through that occupational license, business license process. That's a typical method in other jurisdictions how you monitor that. But short of not having permits, it's really catch as catch can
Well, in
kind
my
of deal.
opinion, that should be in the plan, for outdoor seating, because we don't have any enforcement of it. Somebody has to complain about it, and then we have to go round and round with the code. Unless we have occupational license and we know how things are changing and we can regulate it, then I think that is not a viable thing to put in any neighborhood plan.
Well, can we put in that they get a certificate of use until, if and when we do an occupational license? Can that be added here, that you get a certificate of use if you're going to change?
Yes, ma'am, that's the present law now. That's already in
Now,
place.
Is it written in this neighborhood plan?
No, but it is a component of the Land Development Code, and this will become a component of the Land Development Code should the board choose to adopt
But
it.
there's no enforcement. I mean, people closing patios and then start adding on. I mean, there's absolutely no enforcement. So, it is a huge problem, and I think unless we nip it in the bud with occupational licenses and know that these people are changing uses.
Commissioner, if I could, I think one of the efforts by the Neighborhood Planning Group, or one of the goals for the Neighborhood Planning Group in proposing a neighborhood plan was to try to capture all of these little nuances, such as the outdoor seating, that would apply in this particular neighborhood, and there'd be one document where they could sort of start to find out what they need to do. To try to pull the various sections of the Land Development Code that folks typically unintentionally bump into, and put those all in one document for the convenience.
So really the neighborhoods are going to have to enforce the neighborhood plan, this part of the plan, because we really can't.
As far as notification, yes, I think they, just like in law enforcement, we find out who committed the crime usually by somebody who told somebody about how great it was.
Yeah, I just don't think it's fair that we have to have neighbor has to turn in neighbor, and then it becomes this group against this group, but we can move on. I don't want to belabor that point, but I'm just saying that, in my opinion, if we don't nip that in the bud, we really can't do anything about this other stuff. But
Let's let Ms. Shamel finish her presentation, then we'll get the question.
I did just want to add that the neighborhood commercial land use category, which is in the comprehensive plan, which was passed during the year process, it actually does not allow for any outdoor seating unless it goes before the Board of County Commissioners for development order to allow for that. So one thing I'd like to point out is on the map up there, only the red parcels are the ones that are neighborhood commercial now, so there's very limited neighborhood commercial, and this would only apply for those for those parcels. Should they?
would this apply only to new? I think did y'all add the word new commercial in here, or is it still just commercial?
That was a different category or a different section.
I think that had to do with commercial parking in the alleyways
Right.
for new commercial uses.
Yeah. But this is for new. This is for new uses, for a changed use or for a new use.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, as she goes through this, I think one of the things it says here is the plan doesn't alter uses. But then when you go over back here, it says that anything operating currently as a neighborhood commercial can just pretty much go ahead and be neighborhood commercial. I mean, let me see if I can find it. I mean, it basically says,
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing point because some of the neighborhood commercial uses there are not in the neighborhood commercial land use category.
right, exactly, but I think by virtue of this, I can't find it now, but I think somewhere in here it says that if you are operating as a neighborhood commercial, then we're just gonna assume your neighborhood commercial land use. And then it goes on to say that we're not gonna alter land uses. That is actually altering land uses without, just saying, well, we'll just let them be neighborhood commercial.
Well, I think neighborhood commercial, Matt, help me out here, is, I think neighborhood commercial is a use within some of the land use categories. However, neighborhood commercial is a separate land use category.
Right, but I think if you call them the same names, then people are gonna think it's, you know, I'm just trying to prevent the case where
Mhm.
somebody's operating out of their home, and then all of a sudden, they decide they wanna put in a restaurant, and they go, well, the plan says here that, as long as then I can do neighborhood commercial, and I'm trying to find it.
Okay, and I see what you're saying. I think maybe if we put, and let me get to the part in the actual plan where it says that if we use the word neighborhood commercial land use category, just add that language so that you're not talking about the other neighborhood commercial uses that are going on in other land use categories, but specific to.
Are they non-conforming?
I don't know that we have non-conforming uses down there right at the moment, but the intent was for the neighborhood commercial parking requirements only to apply to the neighborhood land use category, neighborhood commercial land use category, and maybe by clarifying that language in number 14, where we're talking about the outdoor parking standards, maybe that would clarify it, that we're only talking about that particular category for the outdoor seating. Does that make sense?
Are we looking at the actual ordinance or the staff report, which?
I'm looking at the actual ordinance.
Then I would think we would want to look at, on page 3 of the ordinance, or actually the plan itself, which is an exhibit to the ordinance. Section 8 and Section 9, would those be the ones you were looking at earlier?
Okay, Section 8 says, all land uses are governed by the comp plan in effect at the time, and the plan does not alter use, mix, or commercial and workplace. And then over in another section, and let me try to find it, it said, if you're currently neighborhood commercial, oh, here it is, I think, as it, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Vivian, go ahead with your presentation.
Oh.
Get back to these.
I got a question, Chairman.
The other standard was the. Oh.
In the event, how would this neighborhood plan affect in the event the red bar got blown away? Could they go back on the same footprint, or is the code going to dictate what they can and can't do there?
That would be according to current Walton County or Walton County Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Codes. This plan doesn't change anything regarding the codes.
Okay, I think there were some comments in here concerning vending on the beach.
That's a separate issue, which I was going to address in the staff findings of fact. There were a few that I called out in the staff report that I was going to address separately, and those ones on the public beach are going to be those.
Okay,
That I'll
well,
address.
I'm going to make an assumption here that y'all have reviewed the lease from the state of Florida to Walton County for Grayton Beach. And it's the only place that I'm aware of, at least around here, where vending is allowed on, technically, I guess, a state beach. They don't do it next door. So, and a matter of fact, there was a big outcry last year concerning that. So I'm just wondering, how do we get around that, if you will, or how can we justify vending on the beach here at Grayton if it may be in some violation of the lease agreement with the state of Florida?
Yes. And we do have a copy of that lease, and that is something that I was going to let the applicant address are the items that are on the public beach. That is the vending and the driving on the beach and the ingress and egress. Those 3 items the applicant is prepared to address. We have discussed it with legal staff and planning staff and the applicant. So,
one of the things on the destruction of the buildings is under vested rights. They've got it on page 2. They said that property owners retain their vested property rights, including but not limited to the right to rebuild as vested, if destroyed, et cetera, et cetera. I think the county has an ordinance, don't we, that says something about 50%. If it's 50% destroyed, whatever. And that I don't think Walton County Land Development Code, the comp plan would prevent them from rebuilding. I think they might have trouble with DEP or the engineers, and FEMA might be the issue. I agree. I would like the attorney to look at 5.0 vested rights and just make sure that because it's going to be the interpretation of this, and to me it's vague. It's really vague in a lot of areas. And maybe this is the point I was making, is under 9.0, existing non-conforming uses, legally established prior to the plan which do not comply with the standards of the plan may continue as long as they remain otherwise lawful as determined by Walton County. So that means, I don't know what that means actually.
Those are basically in all of the neighborhood plans, and they're saying that they're deferring to Walton County code.
When it was before the planning commission, my recollection was that the representation to us was that the purpose of that was to essentially adopt the land development code and the comprehensive plan for purposes of vesting. But if we might want to clean the language up a little bit, that's my understanding. Now, Billy would correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding. But we can clean the language up a little bit if we need to.
I think you just need to make it really clear because, it's these gray areas where we're constantly going to fit.
Yeah, and of course, that was one of the subjects of our Coastal Dune Lake revisions we were talking about. But yes, ma'am, we will certainly clean that language up if we need to. 9 and 5.
Okay, and then we'll get back to Commissioner Chapman's question regarding vending on the beach, and we'll have Mark and the applicant discuss that. The last section that I'd like to point out is on page 6 of the staff report, rental signs in Grayton Beach, and this is where they are adding language to have some consistency in the signage in Grayton. It's something that the community would really like to have, just so that it has a better look to the entire neighborhood as you go in, and there aren't just signs here, there, and everywhere, and the neighborhood was in support of it. And they are going to have only one sign per property allowed and no larger than 4 square feet. And other than that, before I get into the 3 areas that staff had questions or concerns on, being the vending on the beach, ingress and egress and permitted vehicles on the beach, are there any other questions about the rest of the plan itself outside of those public areas?
I've got something. I don't know if you're going to have Mr. Bizette come out and address some of these things, but the parking on the beach is one. But I noticed that in number 22, item 22, which is your future goals, and they talk about they're going to seek funding for landscaping, downtown trash, et cetera. They don't say who they're going to seek it from, and that they're also going to encourage Walton County to provide incentive to landowners to protect properties, and that's not clearly defined to me. And Mr. Bizette, no offense to you, but I have seen other entities when they say, well, I'm going to go to Walton County, and it's usually, I want. So I'm not clear what those two areas are meant to include. Why don't you come on up, and we'll take some of these other things here.
I think Vivian, just before Vivian sits down, one thing is, just some little nuances in here, like for instance, on 12-0, they want, the neighborhood is to be notified of any decisions concerning infrastructure and all that. I think you need to say notified by the county or by regional utilities or by whoever is going to notify you of the things that they're going to be doing. And then, under 14.0, as it relates to neighborhood commercial, the current comp plan allows outdoor seating. Actually, it allows outdoor seating only after the approval of the Walton County Board of County Commissioners, so I think that needs to be reworded.
Okay, that was
And then
14.2.
14.02, and then 14.2, at the bottom, it says parking requirements imposed by neighborhood commercial shall be met completely within the property boundaries where the neighborhood commercial structure is located. I think that's where you get into the red bar and the other places that there's no way that they can provide all the parking on their property, so.
In that one was one of the recommendations by the Planning Commission to remove that last sentence.
Okay, that would be my comment, because it's going to be tough to do that.
Spell your last name for the record, Billy, because it's going to be different.
Sure. My name is Billy, and my last name is Bizzett, and the spelling is Buzzett, and I live in Grayton Beach. You ready to go?
Billy, I know that there's some other questions that you've heard up here, but I've got one about the driving on the beach, and I know there's 330 parcels in Grayton Beach. How many of those parcels currently have driving on the beach permits?
I don't know. What we do know, and the information we've been able to get to date, I may be a little off on my numbers, but I think I'm close. There's around 460 vested, grandfathered in permits. There are 150 lottery permits, and there's 66 disabled permits. So all that adds up to 600 and something permits. But specific to your question, I cannot drill down and tell you of those permits who actually in Grayton Beach holds one and doesn't. I mean, I do, and there's people in this room that do. What we do know is that property in Grayton, for good or bad, does not transfer very often. And we went back and looked over the last 5 or 6 years to get a kind of a trend on how many times property sells. And it's around 6 or 7 houses annually sell in Grayton. And of those 6 or 7 houses that sell, I would say a third of that number is bought by people who also live in Grayton. So we're a little bit of a weird bunch. You know, we were started back in the 1800s, and some of the same people that started our community still live there today. I mean, not those people, but their heirs. And that's just the quirky nature of what we are. So on that particular topic, I can't give you specifics because I haven't gotten it yet. Do I think that the number's out there and somebody can provide it for me? I do. I would think the clerk would know. If they could give me an alphabetized list of who has the permits, I can compare it to an alphabetized list of who owns property in Grayton Beach, and I could tell you the answer to that. And I think, as of yesterday, Ms. Schammel was trying to get that information, and I don't know if anything happened today.
No.
Okay.
I copied you on the email as well.
So I don't know the answer.
Okay. But there are a number of properties there that are rental properties, is that correct? And I know
Yes.
you and I had a discussion about this.
Yes.
How would you, and it's intended for the people that own the property on their own vehicle to use the driving on the beach permit.
Yes.
How do you preclude a renter from coming in and being said, hey, the car's in the garage, the permit's on it, go for it?
It's been my understanding for the last however long we've had permits that that was a prohibited act, that the permit was for your personal use or your personal family's use, not for commercial use.
And how do you enforce that, though?
Well, I think it should be the death penalty. I think if somebody catches you down there, I think you should lose your rights forever to drive on that beach if you are using that and giving it away for rental purposes.
And who does that enforcement?
I think the sheriff does. He's down there all the time now.
But this is part of a neighborhood plan. Why is there? I mean, that's shifting a burden now onto another county entity.
Well, I mean, the county does. For example, last spring break, some very smart college kids that went to Vanderbilt, got a good idea. It was really a bad idea, but they took a beach permit, peeled it off a car, and made color copies of it, cut them out, and put them on 25 or 30 vehicles. Now, eventually they got caught. The sheriff did the catching of them. In our community, if you were going to have a renter use somebody else's beach vehicle to go there, I think that you'd get told on. I think the people of this community wouldn't tolerate it. We are just very protective of it, and I value your time, and so I'm not going to bore you with it all. But our community has been very involved for a long period of time for a lot of things that are going on in Grayton Beach. And I met with you all, and I mentioned to you that there was a group called the Friends of Grayton Beach who 40 years ago recognized the threat to Grayton when all of the beachfront and the beach between Grayton and Gulf Trace was going to be developed. And they fought, and they hired lawyers, they spent money, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But next month, or March, we're going to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the state of Florida buying that property. And I'm very passionate about this, and if it wasn't for the people of Grayton, we wouldn't have this conversation. But that's one of the most wonderful assets of this community, and it's really part of the heart and soul of our community. I can't imagine Grayton Beach without beach. And so we would find it to be a very friendly amendment and to put in our plan that you may not ever use a beach permit for anything other than your personal use, and if you do, you lose your rights forever. We're firm about that. There's not any ambiguity to that, and I have personally never seen it happen, ever.
But, and I'm gonna play devil's advocate here, so I leave my Jeep here, I live in, Chattanooga, and I leave my vehicle here that has the permit on it, and of course, the key to that Jeep is hanging in the kitchen. How do you expect the sheriff's department, what does he do, go down and ask the person driving that vehicle, can I see your driver's license?
Well,
because I can tell you right now, the sheriff's saying he ain't gonna bother with that. He's got bigger fish to fry. No,
I think that there's a couple things. One is I would hope people take more personal responsibility. I would not personally want to be liable for some third party taking my vehicle without my permission and driving down the beach or with my permission.
Can we get back to the numbers? I'm interested to know. There's 460 plus 150 plus 66. That's 676 current permits out there, and we don't know what the number of proposed. We don't know the number of proposed permits that this plan would actually institute.
Well, we kind of do, but I can't tell you. I wouldn't swear to it. But we have taken a poll of folks who live in Grayton Beach, who have property in Grayton Beach, and we think the number is around 35. A lot of people already have permits. A lot of people don't want permits. I got emails from a lot of people saying, I'm 100% behind the plan, but let me just tell you personally, I don't want a permit.
And then the other thing is, I've got people in my neighborhood that go and that call me all the time going, I want a permit too.
Well,
can I get one? Could I get one personally, me, Cindy Meadows?
You could get in the lottery and get one.
I could get in the lottery and get one, okay.
But I think a lot of people in Grayton Beach have put a lot of effort to protect Grayton Beach, to preserve Grayton Beach, and they put up with a lot in return for that. It is the community's beach. We have unbelievable traffic issues, noise issues, trash issues, and we're saying in consideration of that, and we do think that there is, a legislative issue here that we have definitely.
What do we give the other people who put up with traffic and noise and stuff in other beaches? What do we give them?
Well, Ms. Meadows, again, what I'm going to suggest is we're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for equal treatment. And we believe that it is unequal. And there's many places in law today. Go to Key West and look where they give preference for parking for the residents versus the visitors. They put a sticker on their car, and guess what? They get to park on the street, and you don't. We do it in schools. A lot of communities, this community has.
We represent 57,000 residents in Walton County.
Yes, ma'am.
We got to represent all those people, and we hand out special dispensation to one group. I'm going to get hammered big time.
Well,
and so you've put us in a real untenable position, because it's hard for us to give special permits to people just because they own a property in a certain beach, because this will set a precedent. And to do that and to explain to our other constituents how we did that, how we did that. And we can say all day long, well, they're very special over there.
No, ma'am, we're not special, but if you took
special, they saved the beach.
We did.
They're the ones, so, we really felt like.
We did, and I have had a lot of conversations with people in this community, and they agree. They think this is fine.
And I just, that is my issue with including a piece of state land that's county leased, that the county maintains, the county, and I know y'all pick up trash and all that, all of us pick up trash, all of us suffer traffic, all of us suffer noise, all of us suffer people partying all night. For a neighborhood plan to include in it a piece of property that's public and then grant themselves special permits within that neighborhood plan, I think that sets a precedent that I don't think was ever intended when we set the neighborhood plans up. I don't think that I could come in with a neighborhood plan and say, I live in Seagrove, we suffer a lot of, so we really don't, we really want the beach accesses to be just for us. And county, could you grant that to us? I just think the philosophical principle behind this, I can't go with it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just remind the board that whatever you do in this instance, certainly your prerogative, but you do have a beach driving ordinance that dictates how you go about getting a permit. If you wish to amend that, it's going to have to be through a public hearing process to amend that particular ordinance.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I think that's, if you want to amend that ordinance, you amend it and you add more, you know, I don't know how you do it fairly because, but with 676 permits out there already, you might as well just say, well, anybody that wants a beach permit, just go and apply and see who shows up, see how many you get. I mean, that's kind of basically what we're doing.
Does anybody remember how many we had before Dee Dee, I'm putting you on the spot? You remember?
I recall 900 and some.
Yeah.
If you remember when that ordinance was amended, there was some pressure from the DEP to begin reducing the numbers of vehicles on the beach. And the effort was to grandfather those that had them at that date.
Right.
With the understanding that they had to continually renew it each year, to put 150 in the lottery so that those other individuals would have an opportunity each year to work through that system. And I can tell you that lottery is handled through, and the handicap, disabled, whatever term we're using, is handled through our office. And you'd be amazed at the lengths folks would go to get a permit. We probably get 500, 400 some applicants for those 150. No, for the lottery.
For the lottery.
But I mean, quite frankly, we've had folks give their car to the neighbor who is handicapped so they could bring him to our office and get a permit so they could drive on the beach. And I understand it's an important issue to you guys. But.
Well, and I have people calling me going, Cindy, I can't afford to live in Grayton Beach. So you, as my commissioner, you're representing me as a taxpayer. How can you give, I'd love to be able to live in Grayton Beach, but I can't afford it. That's what they say. So how can you, as commissioner, who represent all of us, let them, have something that we can't get?
Well, if I may follow up, I do think it ends up being a philosophical issue, and I respect a difference of opinion. I philosophically see throughout law in this state and across the country where preferences are given. I gave you an example of parking. It also happens in the example of schools. If you live closer to a school, you get a preference over somebody who lives further away. They do stuff like that. And again, I believe that right now you have a class of people who have homes in Grayton Beach who reside in states, not Florida, or live in counties, not Walton, and can't get a permit. Can't even try to get a permit. And
then the ordinance needs changing then.
It bothers them when they're sitting out in front of their house
then we need to
and
change
seeing all folks driving by them.
Well, then we need
Well,
to
I do think it needs to be
the
changed.
ordinance
but-
then, and not put it in a neighborhood plan.
Well, as I've mentioned to you and the materials I provided y'all, that beach is, without the beach, we have no neighborhood, and we have no neighborhood plan. It's that important. This other stuff, which I'm happy to address, is important to our community, But you read the neighborhood plan law, and a lot of it stands as if you are starting from a blank slate. Well, of course, we have a community that's 125 years old. We're not changing roads and widths and all that kind of stuff. It's not appropriate.
So is what you're saying is if you don't get that section, if you don't get the driving permits, then you don't have a plan? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is it's not my plan, it's our community's plans. But
That's, when I said I mean.
there's a lot of people here from the community that's here.
Right.
And I think it's very important that I do.
But I'm saying that if that section's not approved and deferred to the big ordinance, to the overall county ordinance, that, I think the rest of the plan is quite good.
I appreciate that.
Just so I'll understand, if someone rents their house, they're only allowed by law to stay there a certain amount of 2 or 3 weeks? I mean, if they rent, is that right, or am I just way off?
But they say as long as they rent.
No, I think that there's some rule that says if you have rental property and you're seeking some type of tax benefit associated with that,
that's what
that you can only use that rental property
All right.
a couple weeks a year.
So give me an idea of, okay, if a person, one of these people, they might not use the permit but 2 weeks, or, if they only come that long. I mean, we're not talking about every day,
No, ma'am. Again, I can't tell you that with specificity. What I do think is I think the number is surprisingly low.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think the typical class of person that you're going to see apply for it is the person who lives out of state.
Right. And then 3 months of the year, 3 or 4, it's crowded. But
Yes,
there's
ma'am.
times that people want to go down there and fish, and there might be 5 or 6 cars down there.
Well, today there was none.
Yeah. So
There weren't any.
I really would like to look at it, and I would like to look at a specialty on 65 or older. If you're 65 or older and you're getting to where you can't.
How about 61 and older?
61 should still, 61 should be able to.
And I feel really tired. I can't get out there either.
Well, I'll pick you up. I've
Okay.
got a permit.
Commissioners,
Thank you.
Commissioners. One of the things that we've been going back and forth on unrelated TDC and doing
Yes,
stuff
sir.
there is the turtle issue.
Yes, sir.
How would this impact turtle nesting season?
Well, right now, it would be the same. The conflict, I guess, if there is one, is turtle nesting season is at the peak of our tourism season, and that's probably when you'd see most of the vehicles on the beach. We work very closely with Turtle Watch. We had the good fortune this year of working with them to excavate several turtle nests, and actually we found turtles that had been disoriented, and the people that found it was a fishing fleet, the guys that are first driving out on the beach. So I think there's a coordinated effort there, maybe not formalized, but I don't anticipate it being any different than it is today.
I fully support the plan, except I do have questions. I wish, Billy, we had a definite number.
Yes, ma'am, I do too.
I would feel much more comfortable, because, there again, I argue with myself a lot. I see the people, in Grayton, you pay taxes, you own it, you want to be able to go on the beach. By the same token, does that mean that somebody that lives in, say, Blue Mountain Beach, look at me and say, hey, you can't use this walkover and go down to the beach because you don't live here?
Yeah, and I don't.
So
I think that you'd probably find from our community.
if we could maybe put a limit, I mean, you say 35. If
and-
we could put a limit of 20, and then I got an email from a lady, and if she's in the room, sorry, that said that her, that she wasn't able to get her permit because of some unforeseen circumstances. I bet she paid her light bill. I bet she paid her water bill. I bet she bought her tag on time. So because, if you want something bad enough, you're going to put it on your calendar. I do. That's why God made Outlook. And it reminds me 3 or 4 times till I finally get around to doing it. So if we had a number, if we said 20 or less or something, then I would, because, you and I talked about 35, and then somebody else said to me, well, there could be as many as 100. But segueing from that, I do think we need to take a look at the ordinance, because I do know it's being abused.
Well, if there's 330 parcels that are involved in this neighborhood plan, then that would seem to me that there would be 330 residential properties that would be eligible automatically for a permit. Now, there may be some assumptions here and there, but that's pretty much, I think, what you have to assume is that everybody 330 residential parcels would have, now some already have them grandfathered, some have multiple permits for multiple vehicles, but I think you have to assume that it's going to be somewhere between 1 and 330. And that's a lot, that's 1,000 cars to put out there on the road, and it may happen one day and it may not, but I think, it's just the idea that I don't think I couldn't vote for it because of what my constituents have called me and said. I couldn't vote for it because of that. I can't give special treatment to somebody just because they own a property in a certain neighborhood, even if it has a beach in front of it or a lake in front of it or a mountain in front of it.
Well, Commissioner Commander, we would be receptive to working between now and the next meeting to come up with a number. I mean,
Yeah, I think we need to come up with a number.
I don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
I just know that there.
I think that would be beneficial, and I also think we need to ask staff to look at our ordinance. Because if I was hearing Dee Dee correctly, I was eavesdropping on a conversation she was having with someone else a while ago. I think it was Larry, I believe, and talking about there's some people she figured out that they have like 17 permits or something. No, the object is to have one permit per lot. And if it's being abused, then we need to tighten the screws, because,
I don't know of anyone that has 17.
I have one.
We need to talk to Dee.
Just shed a little light on that. There was an individual that had a permit that the clerk's office issues the permit. We do the lottery and tell them who those winners are, and when they need some help, we help them. But that particular individual had a grandfathered permit, went to the clerk's office, and said they needed to transfer it to another vehicle. They did not return the original permit, but they were issued an additional permit for the second vehicle. Did that, I believe, 3 times in just a few months period. So it had the potential of having 3 different permits, or 4 maybe, and the 15 cars came from the fact that we actually went to the the tax collector's office to try to research, did they still own this car, this car, or this car, which they did, but they also had a total of 15 cars registered with license plates on it. Well, we couldn't identify all of them as permits, but we suspect, and we may be wrong, that those old permits weren't scraped off and the new ones put on. So there's ways to manipulate the system to have those multiples. We certainly trust people not to, but that doesn't always work.
Yeah, right.
While I'm up here, could I address a couple of the issues that you all raised? Commissioner Meadows, you mentioned the neighborhood commercial. I want to make sure that everybody's really clear that we're addressing a land use category called neighborhood commercial, not general commercial. We as a community supported the ERA amendment several years ago, putting in neighborhood commercial in communities. It's kind of like commercial light, if you will. There's an understanding that it's going to be next door to a house, more likely than not. And that's why in that comprehensive plan amendment, there is a provision that says if you want to have outdoor seating, outdoor music, you have to have a public hearing and the public has the opportunity to speak. And I think at that time would be the time that this commission could then impose the parking requirement for outdoor seating. And again, this is a parking requirement that's similar to what's in the Point Washington plan. This has absolutely nothing to do with any general commercial that's existing in Grayton today, specifically the Red Bar. So that was the neighborhood commercial. Those things about vested rights and stuff like that, if you look in your land development code, there's several things that are mandatory to a plan and others that are permissive. You can put them in if you want. One of them is a statement that we're not changing anybody's vested rights. So that's why that's in there. Specific to the goals that you see at the back, these are some aspirations that our community has. We did get permission from Walton County a year or 2 ago to vegetate downtown Grayton with some trees and stuff. We asked permission to be able to do that with a right-of-way agreement. They gave us the agreement. We cut out the pavement according to your requirements and went on our own dime, paid for that, and paid for the vegetation. My anticipation is that's what we would do in the future. The reference in the plan to historic preservation is there is a law that was passed. It was actually a constitutional amendment, and it just says to counties, if you all ever, and you don't have to do it, but if you have an interest, we're giving you the tool on how to do it. If you want to provide an incentive to people to protect historic properties, you can. And this is something that we put in there that says that might be something we would want to talk to the county about. Honestly, I don't think it has much application in Grayton, a little bit. Probably has more application on the county-wide and specific into Funiac, where you have a lot of historic properties. But that's nothing more than an aspirational statement. On the issue of vending, we want to make sure we are not addressing or changing anything on how vending is done. It was a hot-button issue in our neighborhood meeting. A lot of people don't like vending on the beach. We figure that that's something that you all can deal with and take your own public testimony. The only thing that this plan does is mention a fact that the ability to launch boats on the beach is found in the lease agreement between Walton County and the state of Florida. All we're doing is republishing a fact. It doesn't mean anything other than that. We're not touching how the ability of folks fish down there. It's not addressed. And everything else about vending is the way you still have vending today on the beach. And I'm going by memory because I can't remember if there was I can't recall if you all had anything else. There were two issues that were raised that we haven't spoken about that were raised in the planning staff report and also by your county staff. One had to do with ingress and egress on the beach. You know, there's two ways to get out on the beach. One is an east and a west one. You probably remember about 8 or 9 years ago around Labor Day, we had 8 people drowned out there. And there was a real concern then, as there is today, to make sure that that access point is easy to get out there because seconds count. The sheriff said if we could get the county to post it as no parking, that would be a way for them to enforce it. We put it in our plan. But as we were working with staff and doing the plan, they said we don't have to wait for that. So that's already been done. So it's a redundancy, if you will. But the posting has been done, and those areas are no parking. And the other thing, I talked about vending, and we've already talked about the beach driving. So, you know, we have worked hard. It's hard to get a lot of people to agree on anything. I think, 2 years ago when we sat down and talked about doing this, everybody was open-minded. We sent certified letters to them. That's why we got the high level of support. And here we sit today with 97% of those who responded in support of this plan. I do think it's a good plan, and I do respect the comments I've heard here today. I know that we have folks here. We're also respectful of your time. I'm not going to speak for them, but I'm more the scribe than anything, but I'm glad we have the opportunity. If you have other questions of me, I'm glad to answer them. Thank you.
Before we take any public comment, we need to get the wishes of the board.
I think we need to maybe continue it because I have some other questions about what the current ordinance says about who gets a permit and who doesn't. It does say here in the plan that some Grayton property owners are owned by out-of-state owners and such. These owners no longer qualify to participate in the lottery. But then, if I'm reading the correct ordinance, it says that Walton County property owners, Walton County non-property owners, Walton County, everybody has to be in Walton County, which, may be something we might want to change.
Well, if they're property owners, they don't have to live here, they have to own property here, right?
Right, but what
So
they're saying is here is Grayton properties are owned by out-of-state owners.
Mr. Douglas, oh, okay.
Yeah, they don't qualify for the lottery.
So they don't qualify for the lottery because they're non-resident real property owners?
That's correct. That's right.
But it says here, they may obtain a permit for the use if they meet the following criteria. So they could actually be
Well, we have some people here that live out of state that have gone to apply for their permit and found that they would not qualify.
Well, and that's one of the things I want to be sure of because according to this, they would qualify. It says non-resident real property owners may obtain a permit for the use of the beach and anyway,
Because
I
I don't think we can adopt the neighborhood plan without first cleaning, because the ordinance is, we would have to put it in the ordinance first and then adopt the plan, right? Or
I would say clean this up with some of the, and then bring it back, and then with the number of permits that there actually would be eligible, and then we'll know what the number is.
Okay. But Mark, then if we adopted the plan, we find out, say, the 35 people.
Yes, ma'am.
And we say, we're gonna go with that, we're still gonna have to amend the ordinance.
Yes, I wouldn't want a neighborhood plan that was conflicted
Conflicting with the
with the
ordinance, so
current
we'd have to
ordinance.
do
So we
both.
want to go back and amend the ordinance.
If,
To make it consistent.
Yes.
we'd have to be consistent, yeah.
So how would you amend the ordinance, just say, and these 35 property owners in Drayton get a permit? I mean, how would you amend the ordinance to say that?
I haven't thought through the language,
That
but
would-
you'd have to put
Yeah.
some language that.
I'm gonna let
they're
him think,
eligible.
I'm gonna let him think it through.
Yeah, I think you'd have to have some kind of language that they're eligible to have.
I think, and Mr. Attorney, this is a question for you.
Mhm.
Could somebody who didn't live in Grayton sue us for discrimination because we gave them a permit and they didn't get one? Because they own property in, say, Gulf Place or Gulf Trace or.
Commissioner, short answer to any question about can we get sued is
Yeah.
yes, but I was asked, I think, by somebody, whether this was some sort of equal protection problem because we're granting a special privilege to one group of people that we're not granting to another. It is not that type of equal protection problem because, quite frankly, neighborhood plans are designed to give special benefits to people in neighborhoods. But to answer your question, yes, we could get sued. On those grounds, I don't know that there would be any.
And I agree,
validity.
special benefits to people who live in the neighborhood.
Right.
But if the neighborhood, if the beach is public and it's leased by the county and owned by the state, it's not particularly under the control of the residents who live in,
So we're kind of hung up on item 20, which is the
Mhm.
vehicles on the beach.
Yeah.
So are we better off to try to continue this to get this resolved, or to try and adopt it subject to that one not being included?
I don't think you can adopt it today. I think it requires 2 public hearings now, and I think you have another
Yeah,
one
it's a
scheduled
land
in
development
February.
code change, so we'll have to have 2 public.
So we have another opportunity to come back and
Okay,
visit
so
this.
do we make a motion to move it to the second public hearing?
Yeah.
So moved.
Second.
Well, shouldn't we also afford enough time to do the research concerning the number of parcels that might play into this?
Well, I plan on going to the clerk's office tomorrow. I'm convinced they have the information. I'm not sure why we haven't gotten it, but I'm pretty sure they have it. I mean, somebody has it.
Well, I'd like to see it.
Yes, sir.
myself.
Shouldn't Patrick Pilcher have it? No, that's Lance, sorry, wrong.
Yeah, I think
Sorry.
it's the clerk. But I'll do my homework, and I'll be back before y'all, and hopefully I have the answers, and if not, I understand.
Do we want it on the 27th?
There's
No,
a
ma'am.
date,
Or
there's
do
a
you
date
want-
already set.
It's
I'm not
gotta
sure.
be on the.
It would need to be the first meeting of next month.
February the 10th?
10th,
Yeah.
February 10th.
So my motion is to hold a second public hearing on February the 10th.
Second.
On or after 5 o'clock.
Okay. Motion and a second. Any further questions by the board?
Just a comment, if you'll stop by my office in the morning right there by the courthouse, we'll be glad to work with you to try
Right. I
to
appreciate
firm
it.
up those numbers.
Okay.
And we'll be glad to have
I'll
you in
come
conversation.
by and see you tomorrow.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Ma'am?
We're adjourned.
My office is right down the hill, come and see me.
I will.
Some of them need to have comments. Some of them, we didn't really ask, we didn't open it up to them. We really didn't.
You're right. My apologies, my apologies. We'll take some limited comments, yes. But please, if you've got the same thing to say as the next guy, say,
Don't say the same.
I agree with what they just said. Come on up.
Wade Wilkinson. I live at the corner.
I'm sorry, your name?
Wade Wilkinson, Wilkinson.
Thank you.
And I live at the corner of Plank and Defuniak Springs. The house that we own now currently was built in 1959 by my great uncle, and this come down through all the family. Well, we've had a beach permit from the time they've had a beach permit all the way up until 2009 when they decided that if you don't have it this year, you don't get it the next year. Well, my wife was in the hospital. I had a lot of issues with family that were real sick. So out of having a permit for 30, 40 years, I missed one time, and now I can't get any more permits. And being a home, I think being a resident of Graydon, and I mean, I've been on Graydon Beach for 55 years, and up until I'm getting too old to walk on the beach, I could drive on the beach. So I would ask y'all to kind of look at the neighborhood proposal due to, I don't rent a house, and I come down here maybe 3 times a year for a week. So I'll be on the beach 3 times a year, and it's going to be like this time of year. I don't come down any holidays, when it's maxed out. So there, for people that don't rent, have continuous permits for all but 1 year, I'd like for y'all to open up and kind of give some people, maybe it's not really special treatment, but yeah, well, it's but due to I mean, I think the ordinance needed to be looked at, because nobody even informed anybody. This is bam, all right, you didn't get one last year, you don't get one anymore. So, I mean, I think the ordinance should be looked at as far as how many you've had, and it's not like, well, I'm not going to get it this year. That permit was bought every year, like clockwork. Okay. So, I think the people at Graydon Beach do put up with a lot, and I think we ought to have the right to. I can see where you wouldn't want a bunch of rental people jumping in a truck, and like you said, that's been shut down. And I guarantee if I saw somebody cruising out a rental, that it would be known. And the few people that live there that come down pretty regular, I mean, I'd come down a lot more if I could drive to the beach. So I'm not going to take a bunch of your time, but I would appreciate y'all looking into it.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Pat Cummins, C-U-M-M-I-N-S. I own property at Graydon. My parents bought that land World War II, back when we still had wild boars running around. I was out of the country when the time came to get the beach permit. I couldn't get it. I've not been able to get one since. I really would appreciate your considering some way to make this work for all of us. I really love your idea, Ms. Jones, about people 65 and older. I would qualify. I'd be grateful for that opportunity. Yes, I understand the bit about special exception and the fact that you may get from that. I also understand that on my piece of property and the people that come around there and the volumes of people that come, they park in my driveway. I have to call the police. They throw dirty diapers in my yard. There's all other kinds of, and that's kind of like comparing apples and oranges, I know. But, if you could give us some consideration, and think about this from the place of the heart, if you can, I sure would appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Cummins. Yes, sir.
I'm Robert Pruitt, P-R-U-I-T-T. Our property is 86 Garfield in Graydon Beach. I'm the 3rd generation family member to have that property. This is the 60th anniversary for me coming to the beach. I can't get a permit. I live out of state, but I can't get a permit. I can't apply for the lottery. I can't get a permit. We had a permit up until the time one of our family members passed. We couldn't get a permit. There are 460 grandfathered permits out there. One of the statistics I'd like to know is how many of them don't own property in the county, don't own property in Graydon Beach, don't live in the state, and have a permit. When this process was instituted, I consider it a taking. The property that we had in our family had an associated privilege for being able to use the beach and to drive to it. When the process was installed, we lost that privilege. It's hard to quantify economically what that meant, but it had an impact. It has certainly had a lifestyle impact on my family. I'd hoped that the fourth generation and the fifth generation of Pruitts to be on that property would have the same privilege and experiences that I had. We know this is a difficult situation. We've got all sorts of precedents on both sides of every fence. In New Jersey, just as an example, they've gone so far on the scarcity of beach that they issue a permit for the person to be on the beach. And you have to buy that permit in the city clerk's office before you can go to the beach. So there's a scarce resource called Grayton Beach. It's a jewel of this county. It's a jewel of this state. The residents and property owners of Grayton have fought for years to preserve and protect this jewel for the benefit of all the residents and visitors. And we get a lot of visitors. 2 years ago, I wrote Commissioner Meadows to help us. Traffic was being directed up Garfield Street from the Red Bar. They got lost, and they all turned around in my front yard. I had hundreds of cars turning around in my front yard because they couldn't find their way out. Commissioner Meadows helped get signage up so that people can get out and get where they want to go instead of turning around in my front yard. We asked for consideration for our plan. There are a lot of elements in it beyond beach driving. We're trying to reinforce the historic use in the cultural endowment that Grayton Beach gives to us, those who live here, own property here, and visit here. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
My name's Bob Murphy, M-U-R-P-H-Y. I live in Grayton Beach and have so for only 35 years, so I'm relatively new. The serious thing about Grayton Beach is that people have stayed there a long time. There's a lot of old families. And we watched the beach grow. We've watched since Van Ness Butler sold me my house, that the whole thing grow up. The essence of the neighborhood plan is that there's a core of this neighborhood that has been there here a long time and knows what they want and has seen the threats that come from outside. We're not trying to change the county. We're trying to protect what we have. And I think the plan does that. As far as renters taking vehicles on the beach, I don't know why you think it just happens in Grayton. I don't know what would make you think that just the Grayton people let their renters drive on the beach. Because if you go down there, and fortunately, I've had 2 hips replaced and I can still walk to the beach. But if you walk down there on holidays, there's literally vehicles take the whole beach. If it's not the vehicles, it's the beach umbrellas and the chairs. So we put up with an awful lot of stuff there. It's as if we lived in a resort that we just coming in to try to, we have to beg our way in. We're not asking for a whole bunch. We're asking that we be treated as if we were constituents of the 5th District and that you're there to protect us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Anyone else?
My name is Scott Covell, last name is C-O-V-E-L-L. Similar to the sentiments that have been expressed before, I'm just concerned about the attention and focus on the driving issue. And it's been referred to multiple times as special treatment. And I understand, excuse me, the use of that term as applied here, but I think there have been a number of anecdotes that have been relayed to y'all tonight that it's not necessarily special treatment we're looking for, it's reasonable treatment. And it was implied before that if somebody, when the year came up in 2009, in order to get grandfathered in, you had to be here and get a permit. And those that didn't get a permit, clearly they didn't pay their power. Not you didn't say they didn't pay their power bill, but they were delinquent or they were irresponsible in some way because they didn't. They can pay other bills, register the car, things like that. So gee, why didn't they come get their permit? You can pay all those by mail or online. You can't get your beach permit online or mail it in. You got to come in and do it. And there are some instances that come up where that happens. So it's not like it's a sad sack lot that we sit around on our hands and didn't get it. There are certainly instances that come up where put people in that position. So again, I guess I'm reacting to the characterization that it's special treatment when I think it's reasonable treatment. The other thing is, it was implied, we're not looking to take anything from anybody else. We're not saying nobody else can drive here. The same rights for other citizens to get beach permits, passes are still going to be available to them. So it's not like we're changing the existing regime as applied to everybody else. You mentioned before, I think, about what an uproar would be if people denied access to the Blue Mountain beach access. We're not talking about denying anybody access to Grayton Beach at all. Everybody can go down there just as they are now. Everybody can get a beach permit under the existing regime. We're not taking away access and trying to ferret access to Grayton Beach for just ourselves. What we're trying to do is keep the beach open to everyone else that enjoys it, continue to enjoy it, and we're asking for a little bit of special consideration for those that reside there, that live there. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Donna Henderson. I'm an
Spell your last
owner.
name, please.
Henderson, first name Donna. I'm a person that has traveled here to speak today, so thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. I own a house in Grayton Beach, and I do rent, but I would never, I can't remember who made the comment about the keys, leaving them in the kitchen. I don't leave my hammer, I don't leave my rake, I don't leave my power tools out for the renters to use. We protect the things that we own as owners, and if I had a car there, which we don't, I certainly would not leave keys. That's a huge liability, and I think it would violate the spirit of this parking pass or the driving pass on the beach. The second comment I have would be regarding what seems to be a huge abuse in your office of people that come to get a new permit. Maybe you could consider instituting, giving the permit only when someone brings in their former permit, or have some kind of process for that. Because for someone to have been able to get 14 or 15 different permits, and who knows how many cars those were, but I don't think that is something that we can control as a community, but something that you guys need to control. And so maybe considering, how you might control those permits going out of your office better. And that's my only other comment. I'd just like for you to consider that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Yes, sir.
I'm Richard Soper, S-O-P-E-R. I'd first like to say to y'all thank you. I know you had adjourned, and then you were compassionate, considerate enough to give us the time for all of us in Grayton Beach. My wife and I own and we live in Grayton Beach, in fact on the main street, Defuniak. And I think, Ms. Meadows, with all due respect...
Sir, please address your comments to the board through the chair, not the individual commissioners.
To the board, I think, in fact, there are differences. There are occasional withs and withouts. It's unfortunate. Sometimes it's fortunate other times. What we're asking, and what I think that we're looking for, is that we, as the caretakers of Grayton Beach, the property owners of Grayton Beach, that we are allowed to be invested in that beach. We're not asking for special treatment. We are asking to be able to maintain that unique community. The first time I ever came to Grayton Beach was with my grandfather from Louisville, Kentucky, who had come down here over 70 years ago. And I came down when I was 5 years old with my dad. We couldn't afford, my grandfather couldn't afford, we can't. I scrimped and scraped and saved because I, from that date until we were able to purchase property, This was, as is said, for all intents and purposes to me, as close to heaven as I could get on the earth. I want that beach to stay the way it is, as much as possible. Living on Defuniak, when we're here for the heavy time of the year, we see the heavy traffic use that it gets, but we still take it upon our own initiative, as well as Billy, his wife, and a lot of the other residents here, to make sure that we pick up, that we clean up, that we have the beach that people can enjoy. We aren't a community where we own the beach. There are those privileged few, such as Rosemary Beach and other places, where they can own the beach. And they can tell you, even though they're 5 or 10 or 6% of trying to extend some of the sand damage to heal it, you cannot come and put sand here because I own the beach. We don't own the beach, but we're the caretakers of the beach. We're those that, as gatekeepers, you come past our homes, you leave past our homes. We're the individuals that take care of the trash and that pick up the beach. And we would like to ask respectfully, absolutely, there should be some numbers, there should be some limitation, no question. We are not saying, as a previous speaker said, that the lottery should be ended. Anyone in the county can still enter the lottery. That's not the issue. You still have ways to obtain beach permits, and we still welcome and want our Walton County residents to come to Grayton Beach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no others, Mr. Bezet, thank you very much for your efforts, and we will have a second meeting then on February, is it the 10th, I believe?
Yeah.
Are you raising your hand or just?
No, I was just putting on my coat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much. This meeting is adjourned.